Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Lenora Pike's night shift always started with the same ritual. She'd clock in at 11 p.m. sharp, swipe her badge through the security reader in the back entrance, and ride the elevator up while the fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune above her head. Third floor, second door on the right. The 911 call center's lighting was always a little too bright for her liking, made her eyes ache after the first couple of hours, left that dull throb behind her temples that wouldn't quit until her shift ended at 7. But after 6 years working nights, she'd learned to live with it the same way she'd learned to live with the coffee that tasted like burnt rubber and the ergonomic chair that squeaked every time she leaned back. She dropped her bag beside her workstation and logged into the CAD system. Computer-aided dispatch, the backbone of every 911 center in the country. Though half the time the software acted like it was running on a calculator from 1987. The screen flickered to life, displaying the county map with its scatter of incident markers already dotted across the grid. Fridays were always busy, even in a mid-sized city like Millbrook. Domestic disturbances, drunk and disorderlies, the occasional armed robbery. She pulled her headset on and adjusted the microphone, then clicked herself available for calls. The first 2 hours passed in the usual blur. A fender bender on Route 9, no injuries. A noise complaint from the apartment complex on Ashland where the college kids lived. They'd be back there before sunrise, guaranteed. An elderly man who'd fallen in his bathroom and couldn't get up. His voice thin and embarrassed as Lenora kept him talking while the ambulance made its way through the grid of residential streets. That one always got to her. The old folks living alone with nobody to check on them. She stayed on the line until the paramedics knocked on his door, heard the relief flood through his voice when he said, "They're here, thank you, sweetheart." Around 1:30 a.m., things quieted down. Marlowe Fitch, working the adjacent workstation, swiveled his chair toward her and held up a granola bar. "Want half? I'm never going to finish this thing." Lenora shook her head, tapping her thermos of coffee. Marlowe shrugged and went back to his crossword puzzle, the kind of calm that only came during the dead hours between bar closing and sunrise. The overnight supervisor had disappeared into his office, probably catching a quick nap before the inevitable 3 a.m. rush when the bars let out and people started making terrible decisions. That's when the call came through. The line clicked active, and Lenora's screen populated with a phone number, an address on Berkshire Lane, one of the older neighborhoods, tree-lined streets and houses built in the 70s. 911, what's your emergency? She kept her voice level, professional, the way the training manual demanded. Stay calm. Get the information. Dispatch the appropriate units. He's going to kill me. The woman's voice came through breathless, tight with panic. He said he's going to kill me this time. I need help, please. Okay, I need you to stay calm and tell me where you are. Lenora's fingers were already moving across the keyboard, pulling up the address details. Single-family residence. Registered to Thomas and June Ellery. No prior domestic violence calls on record, which didn't mean much. Plenty of people suffered in silence until something finally broke. "Are you June Ellery?" "Yes. Yes, that's me. Please send someone. He's in the garage, but he's going to come back in and..." The woman's voice cut off into a choked sob. "June, I'm sending officers to you right now. I need you to tell me, is he armed? Does he have any weapons?" Lenora was already flagging the call as priority, marking it for immediate dispatch. Her other hand hovered over the radio controls. I don't know, maybe he has guns in the safe, but I don't know if... Another sob, then something that sounded like a door slamming in the background. Oh God, he's coming. June, where are you in the house right now? Lenora kept her voice steady, even as her pulse kicked up. These calls were always a gamble, always a question of whether the responding officers would arrive in time, or whether they'd be walking into something much worse. Can you get somewhere safe? Lock yourself in a room? That's when Lenora heard it. Another voice on the line, faint but distinct, speaking underneath June's panicked breathing. At first, she thought it was interference, some kind of crosstalk from another channel bleeding through. The county's 911 system was old enough that weird technical glitches happened sometimes. Phantom rings, static bursts, that electronic warble that made it sound like the call was underwater. But this wasn't static. This was words, clear as day, speaking in perfect synchronization with her own voice. Can you get somewhere safe? Lock yourself in a room? The echo came a fraction of a second after Lenora spoke, mimicking her exact inflection, her exact cadence. She froze, her finger hovering over the dispatch button. That wasn't possible. The system didn't create echoes like that. Conference calls sometimes generated feedback loops, but this was a direct 911 line from a landline. No conferencing capability. June, did you hear that? Lenora asked. Is someone else on the line? What? No, I don't. Please, just send help. June's voice rose to a near shriek. Lenora shook off the weirdness and hit the dispatch button, broadcasting the call details over the radio. All units, domestic disturbance in progress, 4725 Berkshire Lane. Caller reports active threat from husband. Possible weapons in the home. Unit to respond? The radio crackled. Control, this is Unit 23. We're 2 minutes out from that location. Responding. Lenora recognized the voice. Thad Rooker, one of the senior patrol officers who'd been working Millbrook streets for over a decade. If anyone could handle a volatile domestic, it was Rooker. Copy that, Unit 23. Caller is June Ellery, female resident, reports husband Thomas is threatening her. Proceed with caution. 10-4, control. Lenora turned her attention back to June. Okay, June. Officers are on their way. They'll be there in less than 2 minutes. I need you to stay on the line with me. Where's your husband right now? I don't know. I heard the garage door, but I can't see. June's voice dissolved into ragged breathing. I'm in the bedroom. I locked the door, but it's just a button lock. He can get through it. Okay, that's good. You did the right thing. Stay in the bedroom. Stay away from the door. Don't open it for anyone except the police. They're almost there. The echo spoke again, a millisecond after Lenora finished her sentence. They're almost there. This time, Lenora heard it clearly, unmistakably. The voice wasn't coming from the caller's end. It was coming from somewhere inside the system itself, riding along the same channel, synchronized perfectly with her own speech. She glanced over at Marlowe, but he was absorbed in his crossword, oblivious. The supervisor's office door remained closed. Control, this is Unit 23. We're on scene at 4725 Berkshire Lane. Rooker's voice cut through her confusion. Residential area, single-family home, lights on inside. No signs of disturbance visible from the street. Copy, Unit 23. Caller is still on the line, reports she's locked in the bedroom. Husband's location unknown inside the residence. 10-4. We're approaching the front door now. Lenora heard June gasp. I hear something downstairs. Oh God, is that them or is that him? June. The officers are at your front door. They're going to make contact with your husband if he answers. Just stay where you are. Lenora's mind was still half-focused on the echo, that impossible voice that shouldn't exist. She pulled up the system diagnostics on her second monitor, scanning for any indication of technical malfunction. Everything showed green, all channels operating normally. The radio crackled again. "Control, this is Unit 23. We have contact with male resident at the front door. He's denying any altercation, appears calm. Requesting permission to enter and check on the wife." Before Lenora could respond, the echo spoke. Requesting permission to enter and check on the wife. But this time, the voice spoke first. A fraction of a second before Rooker's words came through the radio, the echo had already said them, perfectly synchronized, perfectly timed. Lenora felt ice crawl down her spine. That wasn't possible. That wasn't how sound worked, wasn't how radio worked, wasn't how any of this worked. An echo, by definition, came after the original sound reflected back. It didn't anticipate. It didn't predict. Unit 23, proceed with entry. "June, the officers are coming in. They're going to want to talk to you, okay?" Lenora kept her voice steady through force of will. "Don't freak out," she told herself. Technical glitch, something wrong with the recording buffer, some weird artifact of the digital system. It would show up in the logs later, and the tech guys would explain it with words like latency and packet loss, and she'd feel stupid for letting it rattle her. "Okay," June whispered. "Okay, I hear them talking to Tom. He sounds normal. He always sounds normal after." "After what, June? After he gets like this? After he—" The woman's voice fractured. "He choked me 2 months ago. I didn't call because he said he'd kill me if I did. But tonight he said it again. Said he was going to finish it. And I had to." Lenora's heart sank. Another case that had been building for months, maybe years, hidden behind closed doors until it finally erupted. "You did the right thing calling, June. The officers are there now. They're going to help you." Through the phone, Lenora could hear muffled voices, deeper tones that had to be Rooker and his partner, higher pitches that sounded like argument. The radio remained silent, which meant Rooker hadn't updated his status yet. Standard procedure for a domestic check: make sure everyone was separated and safe before reporting back to dispatch. Then the lights went out. Not in the call center. The fluorescent panels above Lenora's head continued their steady buzz. Marlowe's workstation monitor continued glowing beside her. But she heard June gasp, heard the sudden shift in the ambient sound on the call. "The power just went out," June said. "The whole house just went dark." The radio burst to life. "Control, this is Unit 23. We just lost power in the residence. Battery backup on the security system kicked in, but the main lighting is down. Husband says it's a circuit breaker issue. He's heading to the basement to check it. We're maintaining visual on both parties, no separation. Copy, Unit 23. Lenora logged the update, but something felt wrong. Circuit breakers didn't usually kill power to an entire house unless something catastrophic happened. And the timing seemed too convenient, right when officers were inside making contact. The echo whispered, "We're maintaining visual on both parties. No separation." Again, the voice came first. A full second before Rooker spoke, the echo delivered his exact words with his exact intonation, and Lenora felt her stomach clench with genuine fear. This wasn't a technical glitch. Technical glitches didn't predict the future. Technical glitches didn't know what someone was about to say before they said it. She pulled her headset off and stood up, moving quickly to Marlowe's workstation. "Hey, are you picking up anything weird on your calls? Any echo? Any interference?" Marlowe looked up from his crossword. "Weird how? I haven't had a call in 20 minutes. "Never mind." Lenora returned to her station, pulling the headset back on. She could hear June's breathing, fast and shallow. Could hear distant sounds of movement inside the darkened house. "June, you still with me?" "Yes." "It's so dark. I can see lights from the police cars outside through the window, but inside it's There's an emergency light in the hallway, but that's all." "That's okay. The officers are still there. They're going to figure out what happened with the power." Even as Lenora said it, she felt the wrongness of the situation settling deeper. Officers didn't like being in unfamiliar houses when the lights went out. Too many places for threats to hide, too many variables they couldn't control, and a husband who conveniently had the lights die right when police showed up to investigate his wife's 911 call. That raised red flags. The radio. "Control, advise, we're having difficulty with communication. Radio seems to be experiencing some interference, lots of static on our end. Can you confirm you're receiving us clearly?" Lenora checked her board. All indicators showed strong signal strength. No reported interference on any channel. "Unit 23, Control is receiving you clearly. Are you hearing static on your transmission or ours?" "Both. Sounds like..." Rooker's voice crackled, breaking up for a moment. "Feedback or something. Never heard it do this before." The echo. "Never heard it do this before." This time, Lenora was watching her screen when the echo spoke, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. The timestamp on her CAD system showed 03:11:47 when the echo delivered Rooker's words. But when Rooker actually spoke them a second later, the timestamp showed 03:11:46. The system was running backward or forward, or somehow showing times that didn't match the actual progression of seconds. She watched the clock, watched it tick from 03:11:46 to 03:11:47 to 03:11:48, each second advancing normally. But the disconnect between what she'd heard and when the system said she'd heard it made her question reality itself. "June," Lenora said slowly, carefully, "I need you to tell me exactly what you see right now. The officers, your husband, where is everyone?" "Tom went downstairs to the basement. One officer went with him and the other one stayed up here with me. She's nice. She's asking me questions about what happened." June's voice had steadied slightly, the immediate panic ebbing now that police were present. "She says I might have bruising on my neck from earlier when he grabbed me." "That's good, June. Let her take care of you." Lenora pulled up the unit details on her screen. Unit 23 was showing as still on scene, status code indicating they were conducting an investigation. Everything looked normal in the CAD system. No error messages, no warnings. But that timestamp anomaly gnawed at her. She checked the master clock in the corner of her screen. 03:12:03. The call timer showed June had been on the line for 8 minutes and 42 seconds. Math that should have been simple, should have been automatic, suddenly felt uncertain. Through June's phone, Lenora heard the female officer speaking in the background, low and reassuring tones. Then male voices from somewhere below, probably Rooker and Thomas Ellery in the basement dealing with the power issue. Everything sounded routine, controlled. Exactly the way these calls were supposed to resolve once officers got on scene and separated the parties. Then June screamed. Not a scream of fear, but of shock, sharp and sudden. The phone clattered like she'd dropped it, and Lenora heard confused shouting in the background. The female officer yelling, "Sir, stop, police!" And then a sound that Lenora had heard too many times on 911 calls. The sound of bodies colliding, furniture scraping across floor, the chaos of violence erupting. "Unit 23, what's your status?" Lenora hit the emergency button that flagged all available units. "All units, possible 10-10 at 4725 Berkshire Lane. Officers may need assistance." The radio exploded with static, a shrieking whine that made Lenora tear the headset away from her ear. Through the noise, she could barely make out Rooker's voice. "Need backup now. Suspect is..." Then more static, then nothing. Marlowe was standing now, moving toward his own console to start routing backup units. The supervisor burst from his office, already reaching for his radio. "What's happening?" "Domestic turned violent. Unit 23 is in trouble." Lenora's training took over, pushing aside the fear and confusion. She broadcast again. "All units, 1033 at 4725 Berkshire Lane. Officer needs emergency assistance. Multiple units respond." The radio cleared for a moment and Rooker's voice came through, tight with exertion. "Control. Suspect grabbed my partner's weapon. We are in pursuit through the residence. Send everyone you have." Before Lenora could respond, the echo spoke, "Send everyone you have." But the timestamp was wrong again. The system showed 03:13:02 when the echo spoke, but 03:12:58 when Rooker spoke. 4 seconds backward. 4 seconds of words spoken before they were actually said. And Lenora felt reality sliding sideways, felt the ground beneath her becoming uncertain. Units were calling in on the radio now, multiple cars responding code 3 with lights and sirens. 3 minutes out, 2 minutes out, coming from all directions to converge on that address on Berkshire Lane, where something had gone terribly wrong. Lenora tried to pick up the call with June, but the line had gone dead. Either disconnected or the phone had been destroyed in the struggle. "Unit 23, report your status," Lenora transmitted, trying to keep the shake out of her voice. Static answered her, just static, and underneath it something that might have been breathing, might have been wind, might have been nothing at all. Then Rooker's voice, but different now, tight and wrong. "Control. We have... Situation is, the transmission broke up, reformed, broke again. In the basement, generator fumes, can't breathe, need... Unit 23. Did you say generator fumes? Is there a generator running in the basement?" Carbon monoxide, Lenora thought. Power goes out. Someone starts a generator indoors without ventilation. Everyone dies quietly without even realizing what's happening. She'd handled those calls before, tragedies that unfolded in silence. Negative. No generator visible. But smell is... Rooker coughed. The sound harsh even through the radio's compression. Something electrical burning, lots of smoke. We're attempting to evacuate all parties. The echo, a whisper now. We're attempting to evacuate all parties. Timestamp 03:13:45 for the echo, 03:13:42 for Rooker. 3 seconds ahead. The system was dying, Lenora thought. Some critical failure in the recording buffer, in the transmission processing, something that was making time itself unreliable. Or she was losing her mind. Either option seemed equally plausible at this point. More units called in, arriving on scene. Backup poured into that residential street. Cars blocking both ends of Berkshire Lane. Officers coordinating with the SWAT call-out since this had escalated to a potential hostage situation. But Lenora's attention remained fixed on the timestamps, on those impossible numbers that kept sliding backward and forward like the system couldn't decide when things were actually happening. Marlowe leaned over. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," Lenora lied. "Just, this call's weird, really weird." "They're all weird at 3 a.m., Marlowe said, trying for levity. But his eyes showed concern, the kind you got when a partner started showing stress cracks. The radio. "Control, this is Unit 38, we're inside the residence. Power is still out. We're using flashlights. We found one officer down on the 2nd floor. Looks like she took a blow to the head. She's responsive, but dazed. 2nd officer and the 2 residents are unaccounted for." Lenora logged the information, her fingers moving automatically across the keyboard even as her mind raced. Officer down, 2 residents and Rooker missing. The house had a basement, Rooker had said. Maze of rooms down there, probably, one of those old 70s layouts with wood paneling and drop ceilings and plenty of places to hide or be trapped. "Unit 38, are you able to access the basement?" Lenora asked. "Stand by." A pause, then, "Negative control. Basement door is blocked from the inside, and we're getting that smell now too. Like burning insulation or melting plastic. Fire department has been notified. Fire is en route. ETA 3 minutes. Lenora checked the map. Saw the fire units closing in on the address. Unit 38. Evacuate the injured officer and secure the perimeter. Do not enter the basement until fire can assess for hazmat. 10-4 control. The echo waited until Lenora finished speaking, then delivered its verdict. Do not enter the basement until fire can assess for hazmat. Same words, same voice, but this time the timestamp showed 03:14:02, and when Lenora glanced at the master clock, it showed 03:14:05. The echo had come from 3 seconds in the past, speaking words that Lenora hadn't said yet, but apparently already had said, and the contradiction made her head throb. She pulled up the call recording logs, searching for the audio file of June Ellery's 911 call. Every call was recorded automatically, stored both locally and in a backup server for quality assurance and evidence. The file showed in the system, marked with the correct timestamps for when the call began and when it disconnected. Lenora clicked play, listened to her own voice saying 911, "What's your emergency?" followed by June's panicked response. But she didn't hear the echo. The recording was clean, just her and June, no mysterious second voice mimicking her words. Either the echo had never existed, a hallucination, a stress response, her mind playing tricks after too many overnight shifts, or it existed somewhere outside the recording system, somewhere the digital files couldn't capture. Lenora, the supervisor, was standing behind her now, his hand on her shoulder. Fire is on scene. They're setting up to make entry into the basement. Ambulance already transported the injured officer to County General. She's going to be fine. We just need to focus on finding Rooker and the 2 residents. Lenora nodded, not trusting her voice. Her headset felt heavy, the weight of it wrong somehow, like it was pressing too hard against her skull. She wanted to tear it off, wanted to run from the console and never come back, but that would mean abandoning Rooker, abandoning June Ellery, abandoning everyone who depended on her voice being the calm in their chaos. The radio. "Control, this is Engine 7. We're at the basement door with breathing apparatus. Making entry now. Heavy smoke presence, visibility near 0. Minutes crawled by." Lenora listened to the firefighters calling out room clearances, listened to them penetrating deeper into the basement, listened to her own pulse hammering in her ears. The echo had gone silent, hadn't spoken since that last transmission, and somehow that silence felt worse than the impossible voice had been, like whatever was causing it had finished its work and moved on. "Control, Engine 7. We have located 3 individuals in the basement, all unconscious. Beginning evacuation now." Relief flooded through Lenora so intensely she felt dizzy. "Copy, Engine 7. Are they breathing? Do you have status?" "All 3 have pulse and respiration. Appears to be smoke inhalation. We're getting them out now. Ambulances are standing by." The supervisor squeezed Lenora's shoulder. "Good work. You kept everyone calm, got the right resources there. This is going to turn out okay." But Lenora couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. She watched the units clearing from the scene, watched the ambulances transporting Rooker and Thomas and June Ellery to the hospital, watched the fire department ventilating the basement and searching for the source of the smoke. Everything was resolving the way these calls were supposed to resolve, with professionals doing their jobs and people surviving what should have killed them. Then the first anomaly report came through. One of the officers on scene had uploaded his body camera footage to the evidence server, standard procedure for any incident involving officer injury. The IT system flagged it immediately. The timestamp on the video didn't match the CAD logs. According to the officer's body camera, they'd entered the residence at 03:08:14. According to the KD system, they'd arrived on scene at 03:11:22. A 3-minute discrepancy, except Lenora had been listening to the radio traffic the entire time. She knew when Rooker had arrived, when he'd made entry, when everything had gone wrong. The KD system had to be right. Except when she checked Rooker's body camera footage, it showed the same thing. His camera's timestamp showed 03:08:47 when he keyed his radio to say, "Control, this is Unit 23, we're on scene." But the CAD system had logged that transmission at 03:11:02, and Lenora's recording of the radio traffic matched the CAD timestamp, not the camera timestamp. Two different timelines, both claiming to be true, both with evidence to support them. Lenora felt something cold settle in her chest, some recognition that she'd stumbled into something that shouldn't exist, some crack in the foundation of reality itself. She clicked through more of the footage. All the body cameras from all the responding officers showed timestamps that didn't match the CAD system. Some were minutes apart, some were seconds, but none of them aligned. And in the background of one video, barely audible, she heard it. That same echo, speaking in her voice, saying words she hadn't said yet but apparently had already spoken in some other version of events. Marlowe was logging off his console, getting ready for the shift change. The supervisor was in his office typing up the incident report. The normal routine of the call center was reasserting itself, the crisis resolving into paperwork and procedure. But Lenora sat frozen at her workstation, staring at the timestamps that refused to make sense, listening to the recording of her own voice speaking words that existed in two times at once. The master clock showed 3:17:35, or maybe it showed 3:14:22, or maybe time itself had become negotiable, and the only thing Lenora knew for certain was that somewhere in the basement of 4725 Berkshire Lane, something had broken that went deeper than a circuit breaker, deeper than a technical malfunction. The echo spoke one last time, so faint she almost missed it. Something had broken. But when she checked the master clock, it showed 03:11:08. 6 minutes before she'd heard the words. 6 minutes before the impossible voice had delivered its final message. Lenora pulled off her headset and stood up, her legs shaky. She needed air, needed to step away from the console, needed to find some anchor point in reality that made sense. But as she walked toward the break room, she heard Marlowe call out, "Hey Lenora, you okay? You've been standing there staring at your screen for like 10 minutes. She turned back. The master clock showed 03:17:35. Marlowe was sitting at his console exactly where he'd been moments ago, crossword puzzle open in front of him. The supervisor's office door was closed, had never opened. None of what she'd just experienced had happened. Or it had happened, but in a different timeline, a different version of the night that had somehow bled through into this one. "I'm fine," Lenora said, her voice steady through force of will. "Just tired." But she wasn't fine, and somewhere in the basement at 4725 Berkshire Lane, Thad Rooker was still responding to a domestic disturbance call. June Ellery was still locked in her bedroom, and time itself was eating its own tail. Thad Rooker had been a cop for 13 years, and in that time he'd learned to trust his instincts above almost everything else. Instincts told him when a traffic stop was about to go sideways, when a suspect was carrying, when a domestic call was going to end with someone in handcuffs or someone in a body bag. So when he pulled up to 4725 Berkshire Lane at 03:11 and felt that familiar twist in his gut, he knew this wasn't going to be a standard call. The house looked normal enough. Two-story colonial with white siding, detached garage, small front yard with a maple tree that probably turned brilliant orange every October. Porch light was on, casting a warm yellow glow across the front steps. A few interior lights visible through the windows. Nothing that screamed danger, nothing that justified the tension crawling up Rooker's spine. But he'd learned a long time ago that the worst calls always looked the most normal from the outside. His partner for the night was Keaton Sorrell, fresh out of the academy with maybe 6 months on the street. Good kid, eager to learn, but still had that rookie tendency to see the best in people until reality knocked it out of him. Rooker caught Sorrell's eye as they stepped out of the cruiser. "Stay sharp on this one. Dispatch said the husband has weapons in the home, and the wife sounds scared. That's a bad combination." Sorrell nodded, his hand drifting toward his service weapon in that unconscious gesture rookies did when they were nervous. "You think he's still going to be aggressive with us here? Some guys get calmer when badges show up. Some guys get worse." Rooker approached the front door, noting the way the curtains in the living room window shifted slightly. Someone was watching. "Let me do the talking initially. You focus on watching body language, looking for weapons, keeping track of exits." The door opened before Rooker could knock. Thomas Ellery stood in the doorway, mid-40s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt like he'd just come from a golf course. He looked confused more than anything, his expression one of polite bewilderment. "Officers, is there a problem?" Rooker kept his voice neutral, professional. "We got a 911 call from this address. Your wife called and said she was in danger. We need to come inside and make sure everyone's okay." Something flickered across Thomas's face. Irritation, maybe, or embarrassment. "I'm sorry you came out here for nothing. My wife and I had a disagreement earlier, but everything's fine now. She must have overreacted." "I'm sure that's true, sir, but we still need to speak with her directly. It's department policy." Rooker took a half step forward, not aggressive, but making it clear he wasn't leaving. "We just need a few minutes to make sure she's safe, then we'll be out of your hair." Thomas hesitated, then stepped back and opened the door wider. "Of course, she's upstairs. I'll go get her." "Actually, sir, we need you to stay down here with us. My partner will go up and speak with your wife." Rooker moved into the foyer, Sorrell following close behind. The house smelled like coffee and something floral. Air freshener, probably. The kind people used to cover up other smells. The living room was tidy, almost aggressively so. No clutter, no personal items scattered around. Everything in its designated place. In Rooker's experience, houses this clean either belonged to people with OCD or people who were hiding something. Sorrell headed for the stairs while Rooker stayed with Thomas in the living room. The husband sat down on the couch, his posture relaxed, hands folded in his lap. "This is really embarrassing, officer. My wife's been under a lot of stress lately, work, family issues. Sometimes she gets dramatic about things." Rooker had heard variations of this speech 100 times. The wife overreacted. The wife was dramatic. The wife was stressed. It was always the wife's fault, never the husband's. What exactly were you and your wife arguing about tonight, Mr. Ellery? "Honestly, I don't even remember. Something trivial. We raised our voices, then we both cooled off. That's marriage, right?" Thomas smiled, inviting Rooker to join him in this man-to-man understanding of how women could be. Rooker didn't smile back. "Your wife told our dispatcher that you threatened to kill her. That's not trivial, sir." The smile faded. "I never said that. She's confused. Like I said, she's been stressed." Before Rooker could respond, Sorrell's voice came from upstairs, tense and careful. "Rooker, can you come up here?" Rooker kept his eyes on Thomas. "Stay here, sir. Don't move from that couch." Then he climbed the stairs, hand resting on his weapon, adrenaline starting to spike the way it always did when a call shifted from routine to potentially dangerous. Sorrel was standing in the hallway outside a closed door, his expression grim. "The wife's in there. She won't open the door with him in the house. She's terrified, Thad. Like genuinely terrified. And she's got marks on her neck. I could see them through the crack in the door." Rooker felt his jaw tighten. Marks on the neck meant strangulation, which meant this had escalated beyond a verbal argument. Strangulation in domestic cases was one of the biggest predictors of eventual homicide. "Okay, I'm going to call this in, get a supervisor rolling. You stay up here with her, don't let the husband come anywhere near this door." He keyed his radio. "Control, this is Unit 23. We're going to need a supervisor at this location. We have visible injuries on the victim and the husband is downstairs. Situation is controlled, but I want someone here before we transport anyone." The dispatcher's voice came back, professional and calm. Lenora, he thought her name was. "Copy, Unit 23. Supervisor is en route. ETA 10 minutes. 10-4, control." Rooker started back down the stairs, mentally preparing for the conversation he was about to have with Thomas Ellery. These conversations never went well. You couldn't arrest someone just for arguing with their spouse, but once there were visible injuries, once there was evidence of assault, everything changed. And guys like Thomas, educated, middle class, respected in their community, they never thought the rules applied to them. Halfway down the stairs, the lights went out. Not just the lights in the house, but everything. The sudden darkness was so complete that Rooker froze, hand automatically moving to his flashlight. He heard Thomas stand up from the couch, heard the man's voice calling out with what sounded like genuine surprise. "What the hell?" "The power just went out." Rooker flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. "Mr. Ellery, I need you to stay where you are. Don't move." "It's probably the circuit breaker. This house has old wiring, it trips sometimes." Thomas was already moving toward a door near the kitchen. "The breaker panel is in the basement. I'll go reset it." "Sir, stop. Stay where you are." Rooker's voice carried the tone that usually made people freeze, the command voice they taught in the academy. But Thomas either didn't hear it or chose to ignore it, pulling open the basement door and starting down the steps. Rooker swore under his breath and followed, his flashlight beam bouncing off concrete walls and exposed pipes. The basement was unfinished, just bare concrete and storage boxes and the mechanical systems of the house. The air smelled wrong down here. Not musty like most basements, but chemical. Sharp and acrid, like burning plastic or overheated wiring. "Mr. Ellery, stop moving and talk to me." Rooker swept his light across the basement, trying to locate the man. The beam caught Thomas standing near the far wall, but something about his posture had changed. The polite confusion was gone, replaced by something harder, more alert. "There's no problem with the breaker," Thomas said, quietly. "The power's out because I cut the main line." Rooker's hand moved to his weapon. "Sir, I need you to step away from the wall and put your hands where I can see them." Thomas turned, and in the flashlight beam, Rooker saw the man's expression had transformed completely. The mild-mannered husband was gone. What remained was cold calculation, eyes flat and assessing. "You don't understand what's happening here, officer. None of you do. What I understand is that your wife called 911 because she was afraid of you, and she has marks on her neck that suggest you put your hands on her. So right now you need to comply with my instructions, or this is going to get a lot worse for you." "Worse?" Thomas laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "It's already as bad as it can get. Do you smell that? That's not electrical burning, that's something else." Rooker did smell it. that chemical odor getting stronger by the second. And now that Thomas mentioned it, it didn't smell like electrical fire. It smelled organic somehow, like decomposition mixed with cleaning solvents. His radio crackled, Sorrel's voice tight with concern. "Rooker, what's going on down there? The wife says her husband has been acting strange for weeks, talking about things that don't make sense." Before Rooker could respond, Thomas moved. Not toward Rooker, but toward a workbench on the opposite wall, reaching for something in the shadows. Rooker's training took over, weapon drawn, flashlight and gun aligned in the Harry's technique. "Show me your hands, now!" Thomas's hand emerged holding not a weapon, but a small digital recorder, the kind people used for meetings or lectures. He held it up in the flashlight beam like an offering. "You want to know what's really happening? Listen to this." He pressed play. The recording started with silence, just ambient noise and what sounded like breathing. Then a voice, male and frightened. "I don't know if anyone will hear this, but I have to try. My name is Thomas Ellery, and I'm recording this on October 8th. If you're hearing this, I'm probably already dead." Rooker kept his weapon trained on the real Thomas, the man standing in front of him. The voice on the recording continued. "Something's wrong with time in this house. I know how that sounds, but I've documented it. Clocks running backward, recordings that predict conversations before they happen, shadows that move independently of their source. My wife doesn't see it. Or maybe she does and she's pretending not to. But I see it, and I think it's getting worse." The real Thomas smiled in the flashlight beam. "That's not me talking. That's the me from 6 days ago, or 6 weeks ago, or 6 minutes ago. Time doesn't work right here anymore, officer. It loops and folds, and sometimes it runs in multiple directions at once. Sir, I need you to put the recorder down and step toward me slowly." Rooker's finger rested on the trigger guard, every muscle tense. The guy was having some kind of psychotic break. That was the only explanation. Stress, maybe drugs, maybe an underlying mental condition. But Rooker had seen people in psychotic states do incredibly violent things, and he wasn't taking any chances. The recording continued. "I tried to leave. I packed a bag and got in my car and drove away. But I ended up back here. Not because I turned around, but because the road just looped, like a Mobius strip. I drove for 3 hours and ended up in my own driveway. June didn't even notice I'd been gone. When I asked her about it, she looked at me like I was crazy. That's enough." Rooker moved forward, reaching for his handcuffs. "Thomas Ellery, you're under arrest for assault. Put the recorder down and turn around." Thomas didn't resist as Rooker cuffed him, didn't say anything as Rooker began to guide him back toward the basement stairs. But as they reached the bottom step, the man spoke again, his voice eerily calm. "You're going to die in this house, officer. Not today, maybe. But you've been here now. You've been exposed to whatever's wrong with this place. It'll follow you. It'll find you when you're alone in your patrol car at 3 a.m., and you'll hear yourself on the radio saying things you haven't said yet, and you'll start to wonder which version of time is real." Rooker pushed him up the stairs without responding, but Thomas's words settled into his mind like ice water. He keyed his radio. "Control, this is Unit 23. I have the suspect in custody. He's been acting erratically, possible mental health crisis. Request an ambulance for psychiatric evaluation." The radio crackled with heavy static, worse than before. Through the interference, Lenora's voice emerged, distorted and strange. "Copy, Unit 23. Ambulance is already responding." The words stretched and compressed like an audio file being corrupted in real time. Sorrel met them at the top of the stairs, helping to guide Thomas toward the front door. The injured officer, Rooker couldn't remember her name, was helping June Ellery down from the bedroom, the woman wrapped in a blanket and shaking. In the beam of their flashlights, Rooker could see the bruising on June's neck, dark purple shadows that would take weeks to fade. But he could also see something else. The bruises were arranged in a pattern that didn't quite make sense. Handprints, yes, but the positioning was wrong. The angle was wrong. It looked less like someone had choked her and more like... what? Like she'd been grabbed by hands that didn't exist in normal three-dimensional space, hands that could reach through and around and somehow apply pressure from impossible directions. Rooker shook his head, clearing the thought. Lack of sleep, the stress of the call, Thomas's psychotic ramblings getting into his head. That was all. The bruises were just bruises, applied by a man who'd attacked his wife in a moment of rage or control or whatever twisted logic domestic abusers use to justify their violence. They got everyone outside just as backup units started arriving. 3 patrol cars and a supervisor's vehicle flooding the street with red and blue light. The supervising sergeant, a veteran named Violet Cormack who'd been on the force longer than Rooker had been alive, took one look at the scene and started issuing orders. Sorrel, get the wife to the ambulance for evaluation. Rooker, walk me through what happened. Rooker gave her the summary while Thomas sat handcuffed in the back of a patrol car, staring straight ahead with that same unsettling calm. When Rooker mentioned the recording, the claims about time not working right, Cormac's expression hardened. Sounds like a psych hold on top of the assault charges. We'll let the hospital sort out what's real and what's delusion. Sergeant, there's something else. Rooker hesitated, unsure how to articulate what he'd experienced. The radio interference down in the basement. It was really bad, and the smell, it wasn't electrical burning. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't normal. Cormac studied him for a moment. You feeling okay, Rooker? No dizziness? No nausea? I'm fine. Just saying the house felt wrong. Houses don't feel wrong. Houses are houses. Suspects have psychotic breaks and attack their wives, and we arrest them. That's the job. But even as Cormac said it, her eyes drifted toward the darkened windows of 4725 Berkshire Lane, and Rooker saw something in her expression that suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by her own words. The fire department arrived to investigate the smell and the power outage, their trucks adding to the chaos of lights and movement on the quiet residential street. Neighbors were starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion, standing in their driveways in robes and pajamas to watch the show. Rooker had seen it 100 times before, the way people were simultaneously horrified and fascinated by violence in their midst, the way they'd gossip about it for weeks, but would never admit to enjoying the drama. One of the firefighters emerged from the house 20 minutes later, pulling off his breathing mask with a puzzled expression. He found Cormac and Rooker standing by the patrol car. We found the source of the smell. There's something in the crawl space under the basement. Looks like an animal died down there weeks ago and decomposed. Probably a raccoon or a large possum. That combined with some kind of gas leak from the water heater, carbon monoxide most likely, that's what you were smelling. Carbon monoxide? Rooker felt his stomach drop. How much exposure are we talking about? Hard to say without testing, but the concentrations were high enough to cause confusion, hallucinations, altered mental state. Anyone who was in that basement for more than a few minutes would have been affected. The firefighter glanced toward Thomas in the patrol car. If your suspect was spending time down there, the CO poisoning could explain the erratic behavior. Cormac swore under her breath. So what? We're supposed to believe the guy attacked his wife because he was hallucinating from carbon monoxide. I'm just telling you what we found, Sergeant. Whether it's relevant to your case, that's your call. The firefighter moved back toward his truck. leaving Rooker and Cormac staring at each other in the wash of emergency lights. Rooker's radio crackled. "Unit 23, this is Control. I need you to verify something for me. Your body camera shows you arriving on scene at 0308, but our CLAD system logged your arrival at 0311. Can you confirm which is accurate?" Rooker checked his watch, then his body camera display. The timestamps didn't match. His camera said 0331. His watch said 0334. The patrol car's dashboard clock said 0329. "Control, I'm showing multiple different times across my equipment. What's the master clock showing?" Silence for a long moment. Then Lenora's voice came back, strained and uncertain. "The master clock is... I don't know, Rooker. It's showing different times depending on when I look at it. 1 second it says 0332, then I blink and it says 0328. Something's wrong with the system." Cormac grabbed the radio from Rooker's belt. "Control, this is Sergeant Cormac. Are you saying there's a malfunction with the dispatch center's timekeeping equipment?" "I don't know what I'm saying, Sergeant. I just know the timestamps aren't making sense anymore. And I keep hearing..." Lenora's voice cut off abruptly, replaced by static. "Control, repeat your last transmission." Cormac waited, but only static answered. She tried again, switching to different channels, but every channel gave the same result: white noise punctuated by occasional bursts that might have been words but were too distorted to understand. Rooker felt that twist in his gut again, stronger this time. He looked at the house, at its darkened windows, at the way the emergency lights seemed to bend wrong when they reflected off the glass. Thomas's words echoed in his mind. "You've been exposed to whatever's wrong with this place. It'll follow you." "Sergeant, I think we need to evacuate everyone from this immediate area. Get the ambulances, the fire trucks, everyone back at least a block." Rooker couldn't explain why he felt this urgency. Couldn't articulate the certainty that they needed to get away from 4725 Berkshire Lane right now, but every instinct he'd developed over 13 years was screaming at him to move. Cormac looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Evacuate? Based on what? A radio malfunction and some conflicting timestamps?" "Based on the fact that Thomas Ellery was right. Something's wrong with this house, with the space around this house. I can feel it, Sergeant. Can't you?" For a moment, Cormac's professional skepticism wavered. She glanced at the house again, and Rooker saw her shiver despite the mild October night. But then she shook her head, reasserting control. "We don't evacuate neighborhoods because of feelings, Rooker. We follow procedure. The fire department cleared the structure. The suspect is in custody. The victim is receiving medical attention. This call is resolved." But even as she said it, Rooker knew it wasn't true. Nothing about this call was resolved. Thomas was in the back of a patrol car, yes, but he was smiling now, staring at Rooker through the window with an expression that suggested he knew something the rest of them hadn't figured out yet. June was being loaded into an ambulance, but she kept looking back at the house with an expression that wasn't fear or relief, but something closer to longing, like part of her wanted to stay despite everything that had happened. And the house itself sat dark and silent, waiting. Rooker's body camera beeped, indicating it had reached storage capacity and stopped recording. He checked the display. According to the camera, it had been recording for 17 hours straight. Impossible, given that he'd started his shift less than 5 hours ago. The footage counter showed 61 gigabytes of data stored, which should have represented days of recording, not a single night's patrol. "Sergeant," Rooker said quietly, "you need to look at this." Cormac examined the camera display, her expression growing more concerned with each second. "That's not possible. These cameras have a maximum storage of 32 gigabytes. There's no way it could hold..." She stopped, staring at the number as it continued to climb. 62 gigabytes, 63, 64. Sorrel approached from the ambulance, his young face pale in the emergency lights. Guys, the paramedics are saying something weird. June Ellery's injuries, the bruising on her neck, they're fading, like visibly healing while they're examining her. They're saying they've never seen anything like it. Rooker looked at Cormac, saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. The sergeant keyed her radio, trying once more to reach dispatch. Control, this is Sergeant Cormac at 4725 Berkshire Lane. We need immediate assistance from the County Technical Unit and possibly hazmat. We have multiple equipment malfunctions and unexplained medical anomalies. Request you advise the watch commander. The radio shrieked, a burst of feedback so loud that Cormac threw the device away from her. It landed on the pavement, still screeching, and through the electronic noise Rooker heard something that stopped his heart. His own voice saying, "Control, this is Unit 23. We're on scene at 4725 Berkshire Lane." But he hadn't keyed his radio. He was standing 10 feet away from the device lying on the ground, watching it broadcast his voice from an arrival that had happened, or would happen, or was happening in some other version of time 20 minutes ago. The emergency lights flickered, all of them synchronized, every red and blue strobe on every vehicle suddenly pulsing in perfect unison. The firefighters noticed, stopping their work to stare at the impossible coordination. The paramedics noticed, pausing in their treatment of June Ellery to look around with growing unease. And Thomas Ellery, still handcuffed in the back of the patrol car, started laughing. Rooker moved toward him on instinct, pulling open the car door. "What did you do? What's happening?" Thomas's laughter subsided into a smile, that same cold smile from the basement. "I didn't do anything, officer. The house did it. The house has been doing it for months, maybe years. We just never noticed until it got strong enough to affect more than clocks and recordings. Now it's affecting everything. Time, space, the boundary between what was and what will be. You came here to save my wife from me, but you can't save anyone from this. No one can." "From what? What is it?" "I don't know. A weak point, maybe. A place where the rules stop working. It started small, déjà vu, objects moving, that feeling like you've forgotten something important but you can't remember what. Then it got worse. Loops, echoes, multiple versions of the same moment existing simultaneously." Thomas leaned forward as far as the handcuffs would allow. "Do you know what it's like to have a conversation with your wife and then have the exact same conversation again an hour later? Except this time you both remember having it before, but you're still having it again. Do you know what it's like to watch yourself walk up the stairs while you're standing at the bottom watching?" Rooker stepped back from the car, his mind reeling. Carbon monoxide hallucinations, he told himself. Mass hysteria. Technical malfunctions. There had to be a rational explanation, had to be something that made sense within the normal rules of reality. But his radio was still broadcasting his voice from 20 minutes ago, and his body camera was still recording hours that hadn't happened, and June Ellery's injuries were healing before anyone's eyes. And somewhere deep in his gut, Rooker knew that Thomas was telling the truth. The house at 4725 Berkshire Lane had become something else, something that didn't follow the normal laws of cause and effect, something that made time negotiable and reality flexible. And everyone who'd entered it, everyone who'd been exposed to whatever force or anomaly or impossible thing lived inside those walls, was now infected with that same instability. Cormac was on her cell phone now, calling the watch commander directly since the radio had become useless. Sorrel was standing by the ambulance staring at his own hands, like he wasn't sure they were real. The firefighters were packing up their equipment with unusual haste, their professional calm replaced by an obvious desire to leave this place as quickly as possible. and Rooker stood in the middle of Berkshire Lane at 03 something or other in the morning, watching the emergency lights pulse in impossible synchronization, and wondered if he would ever be able to trust his own perception of time again. Thomas's voice drifted from the patrol car, quiet and almost sympathetic. "It's in you now, officer, in all of you. You'll think you're fine at first. You'll go home, write your reports, testify in court about the domestic violence suspect you arrested. But then you'll notice things. Your watch running backward, your voice on the radio before you transmit, conversations you swear you've already had, and you'll realize that 4725 Berkshire Lane isn't a location anymore. It's a condition, and you're carrying it with you wherever you go." Rooker wanted to respond, wanted to deny it, wanted to insist that once they left this place everything would return to normal, but he couldn't make himself believe it. He checked his watch again. 0341, or 0338, or 0345. The numbers kept changing depending on when he looked, and he couldn't tell anymore which time was real, if any of them were real, if time itself was just a convenient fiction that had temporarily stopped applying. The ambulance pulled away with June Ellery inside, its siren starting the slow fade as it headed toward County General. Other units began clearing out, the supervisor releasing them to return to patrol now that the immediate crisis had been contained. Within 20 minutes, only Rooker's car and Cormac's supervisor vehicle remained on Berkshire Lane, along with Thomas still sitting handcuffed in the back seat. Cormac approached Rooker, her expression carefully neutral. "The watch commander is sending someone from Internal Affairs to debrief everyone who responded to this call. He wants to review all the body camera footage and figure out what went wrong with the equipment. And if it's not the equipment, if it's something else, then IA will figure that out too." But Cormac didn't sound convinced. She looked exhausted, older than she had when the shift started, like the past hour had aged her in ways that went beyond normal time. "Go home, Rooker. Get some sleep. We'll sort this out in the morning." Rooker wanted to point out that it already was morning, or would be soon, or had been for hours, depending on which clock you believed. But he was too tired to argue, too overwhelmed by the impossibility of what he'd experienced. He got in his patrol car, started the engine, and pulled away from 4725 Berkshire Lane without looking back. But Thomas's words followed him. "It's in you now, in all of you." And as Rooker drove through the empty streets of Millbrook, he heard his own voice on the radio saying, "Control, this is Unit 23, we're on scene." Even though he was miles away from the scene, miles and minutes and moments away, or maybe he was still there, would always be there, trapped in the loop of a call that had already happened and was still happening and would happen again in some version of time that didn't follow the rules anymore. His dashboard clock showed 0415, then 412, then 418, and Rooker realized that Thomas had been right about everything. Lenora Pike sat in the Internal Affairs interview room at 9 o'clock a.m., or at least that's what the wall clock claimed. Her shift had ended at 7 o'clock, but she'd been asked to stay for the debriefing along with every other dispatcher and officer who'd been involved with the Berkshire Lane call. The room smelled like stale coffee, and the kind of institutional anxiety that accumulated in places where careers went to die. Across the table sat Lieutenant Hollis Brandt, a 20-year veteran of IA who'd built a reputation for being thorough, fair, and completely immune to bullshit. He had her CAD logs spread across the table, printouts marked with yellow highlighter showing the timestamp discrepancies. "Walk me through it again, Ms. Pike. The caller, June Ellery, contacted 911 at what time?" 030917, according to the initial log. Lenora's voice was hoarse from 6 hours of talking to panicked callers and confused officers. She reported that her husband was threatening her, said she feared for her life. And Officer Rooker arrived on scene at what time? That's where it gets complicated, Lieutenant. The CAD system logged his arrival at 03:11:22, but his body camera timestamp shows 03:08:14, a 3-minute discrepancy. Brandt tapped the printout with his pen. Technical glitch. Body cameras lose sync sometimes, especially if the battery's been changed or the unit's been reset. That's what I thought at first. But then every responding unit showed the same discrepancy. 5 different body cameras, all showing times that didn't match our KD logs, all off by different amounts. Lenora pulled out her own notes, pages covered in frantic handwriting from the shift. Unit 23 was 3 minutes early. Unit 38 was 5 minutes early. The supervisor's vehicle was 2 minutes late, and the fire department's arrival time showed them on scene 4 minutes before they were actually dispatched. Brandt's expression remained neutral, but Lenora saw the flicker of concern in his eyes. "You're saying the fire department arrived before you called them?" "According to their equipment logs, yes. But according to our dispatch records, no. 2 different versions of events, both with documentation to prove they happened." "And the radio interference you reported? The echo you claimed to hear?" Lenora hesitated. This was the part that made her sound crazy, the part she'd debated leaving out of her statement entirely. But IA was going to pull the audio recordings anyway, and if there was any chance the echo had been captured on tape, she needed to address it now. I heard a voice on the line. My voice, repeating things I said, but with a slight delay. Sometimes the delay was after I spoke. Sometimes it was before you spoke. Brandt's tone was carefully neutral, the kind of neutrality that suggested he thought she was either lying or delusional. "You heard yourself say things before you said them. I know how it sounds, Lieutenant, I know. But I'm telling you what I experienced during that call. The echo started subtle, just a slight repetition that could have been feedback, but it got worse as the call progressed. By the end, the echo was speaking full seconds before I did, saying my exact words in my exact voice. And yet the audio recordings show nothing. No echo, no doubled voice, just you and the caller." Brandt slid a transcript across the table. "We've had 3 different technicians analyze the recordings. All of them confirm there's no anomaly in the audio." Lenora stared at the transcript, at her own words rendered in clean black text without any indication of the impossible thing she'd heard. "Then either I'm losing my mind, or the recording system doesn't capture whatever's actually happening." "Which seems more likely to you, Ms. Pike?" She wanted to say the recording system was flawed, wanted to insist that her perception was reliable, and the equipment was lying. But 6 years of working dispatch had taught her to trust documentation over memory, to believe the logs over any individual's recollection of events. People misremembered things all the time, especially under stress. Equipment didn't hallucinate. Except now the equipment itself was showing impossible data, timestamps that didn't align, recordings that predicted the future. So maybe equipment could hallucinate after all. Or maybe there was a third option that Lenora didn't want to consider. That something had happened at 4725 Berkshire Lane that didn't fit within normal parameters of reality. Something that affected perception and documentation in ways that made both equally unreliable. "I don't know what's more likely, Lieutenant. I just know what I experienced." Brandt closed the folder, his expression softening slightly. "You've been working nights for 6 years, Ms. Pike. That kind of schedule takes a toll on cognitive function, on perception, on mental health. The department offers counseling services. I'd recommend you take advantage of them." It was a dismissal dressed up as concern, a polite way of saying she was stressed and unreliable and needed to get her head straight before returning to active duty. Lenora felt anger flare in her chest, but she pushed it down. Getting defensive wouldn't help. Am I being placed on leave? Not at this time, but I am recommending you take at least 3 days off to rest. When you return, you'll be assigned to day shift for a 2-week evaluation period. If you continue to report perceptual anomalies, we'll need to have a more serious conversation about your fitness for duty. Lenora stood, gathering her notes. Is Officer Rooker being given the same recommendation? Officer Rooker's interview is ongoing, but between you and me? Brandt leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking very tired. Every person who responded to that call is reporting something impossible. Different impossibilities, different anomalies, but all of them insisting that something was fundamentally wrong at that location. So, either we have a mass hysteria event involving trained professionals, or we have the equipment failure affecting multiple independent systems, or, he trailed off, leaving the third option unspoken. Or, something actually was wrong, Lenora finished. I didn't say that, I can't say that, because there's no protocol for something was wrong in a way that violates basic physics. Brandt rubbed his eyes. Go home, Ms. Pike. Get some rest. Try not to think about this call for a few days. But Lenora knew she wouldn't stop thinking about it. The echo was still in her head, that impossible voice speaking her words before she said them. And she couldn't shake the certainty that it was still happening somehow, still echoing forward and backward through time, still speaking in her voice from moments that hadn't occurred yet or had already passed, or were happening simultaneously in multiple versions of reality. She left the interview room and headed for the parking structure, exhaustion settling into her bones. The morning sun was too bright after a night under fluorescent lights, making her squint as she walked to her car. Other officers and dispatchers were scattered around the parking structure, some just arriving for day shift, others leaving after their own IA interviews. She recognized Thad Rooker leaning against his personal vehicle, a decade-old pickup truck that had seen better days. He looked up as she approached, and Lenora saw the same exhaustion in his face that she felt in her own body. They tell you you're crazy too? He asked. They told me I need rest and counseling, which is the professional way of saying I'm crazy, yes. Lenora stopped a few feet from his truck. Did they tell you about the body camera footage? 17 hours of recording in a 5-hour shift. Footage that shows me arriving at locations before I was dispatched, having conversations that haven't happened yet, clearing scenes that are still active. Rooker laughed, but there was no humor in it. IA's official position is that the cameras malfunctioned, all of them, simultaneously, in ways that have never been documented before. And your unofficial position? Rooker was quiet for a long moment, staring at the concrete wall of the parking structure. My unofficial position is that Thomas Ellery was telling the truth. Something happened to that house, something that broke the normal rules, and now it's in us. We carried it out when we left. Lenora felt a chill despite the warm morning air. You're still experiencing anomalies? My watch has been running backwards since I left that call. Slowly, just a few seconds every hour, but it's consistent. And twice on the drive home I heard myself on the radio calling out my location before I actually transmitted. The dispatch center confirmed they received the transmissions, but according to their logs, I sent them from places I hadn't reached yet. He looked at her directly. You're still hearing the echo, aren't you? She wanted to deny it, wanted to maintain the professional distance that suggested she was fine and stable and ready to return to duty. But something in Rooker's expression told her he'd see through the lie, and more importantly, he'd understand the truth. Yes, it's quieter now, but it's still there. Sometimes when I'm talking, I hear myself a fraction of a second before the words come out of my mouth. Like there's a version of me slightly ahead in time, speaking the same words. We need to go back. Rooker said it flatly, matter-of-factly, like he was suggesting they grab coffee. To the house. We need to figure out what's actually happening before it gets worse. You think it's going to get worse? I think whatever started in that house is spreading. Time anomalies, perception distortions, recordings that don't match reality. Those are symptoms. And symptoms don't usually get better on their own. They progress. Rooker pushed off from his truck. I've got 3 days of forced leave before they'll let me back on the street. That gives us time to investigate without the department breathing down our necks. Lenora should have said no. Should have gone home, taken the sleeping pill her doctor prescribed for night shift workers, and tried to sleep away the memory of that impossible call. But she knew Rooker was right. The anomalies weren't going to stop just because IA had filed them away as equipment malfunctions and stress-induced hallucinations. Whatever had started at 4725 Berkshire Lane was still active, still spreading, and ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. Okay, she heard herself say, but we need to be smart about this. If we go back to that house during our suspension and something happens, the department won't back us up. We'll be on our own. We're already on our own. IA thinks we're crazy. The watch commander thinks we're experiencing mass hysteria, and the equipment logs are being dismissed as technical failures. No one's investigating the actual house. Rooker pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. But I know someone who might be able to help. Nadine Arledge works traffic operations. She's got access to traffic camera footage and automated license plate readers. If there's something unusual about the patterns of vehicles around that house, she'll be able to find it. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a corner booth at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the station, waiting for Nadine Arledge to arrive. The place smelled like bacon grease and dishwater, populated by the kind of people who existed in the margins. Third-shift workers coming off their jobs, insomniacs nursing coffee until a reasonable hour, the homeless taking advantage of free refills and air conditioning. Lenora ordered coffee she didn't need and toast she wouldn't eat, just to justify occupying the booth. Nadine arrived 15 minutes later. A thin woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She slid into the booth across from them, her laptop bag thumping onto the vinyl seat. "You both look like hell," she said by way of greeting. "We've had a long night," Rooker replied. "Did you get the information I asked for?" Nadine pulled out her laptop and opened it, angling the screen so they could all see. Traffic camera footage from the intersection nearest to 4725 Berkshire Lane, going back 6 months, and ALPR data from the license plate readers in that neighborhood. She pulled up a map showing the street layout, with red dots marking camera locations. "You want to tell me what I'm looking for?" "Anything unusual, patterns that don't make sense, vehicles appearing in places they shouldn't be, timestamps that seem off." Lenora leaned forward, studying the screen. "We think there's something wrong with that location. Something that affects electronic systems, and maybe more." Nadine's expression suggested she thought they were wasting her time, but she navigated through the database anyway, pulling up weeks of footage. "Define unusual for me because I'm seeing normal suburban traffic patterns. People leaving for work in the morning, coming home in the evening, occasional delivery trucks and service vehicles. Run the footage at high speed," Rooker suggested. "Sometimes patterns are easier to spot when you're not watching in real time." Nadine set the playback to 10x speed, and they watched days compress into minutes. Cars flowed past the intersection in their predictable rhythms, following the patterns of human routine. Morning rush, midday lull, evening rush, overnight quiet. Nothing unusual, nothing that suggested anything was wrong. until they reached footage from 3 weeks ago. Wait, stop. Lenora pointed at the screen. Go back about 30 seconds and play it at normal speed. Nadine rewound the footage and let it play. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night. A single vehicle appeared in frame, a dark sedan heading north on Berkshire Lane. It passed through the intersection, disappeared from view, and then, 5 seconds later, appeared again from the same direction, passing through the intersection a second time. Camera glitch, Nadine said. Happens sometimes when the buffer gets corrupted. Keep watching, Rooker said quietly. The sedan appeared a third time, then a fourth, then a fifth, each time emerging from the same position off camera, passing through the intersection, and disappearing, only to reappear seconds later and repeat the loop. By the 8th repetition, Lenora could see details that shouldn't have been consistent. The driver's hand position on the steering wheel, identical across every loop. The exact angle of the car's trajectory, unchanged despite what should have been normal variations in human driving. That's not a camera glitch, Nadine said slowly. I don't know what that is. The sedan made its 15th loop through the intersection, and then suddenly there were two of them. The original car passed through, disappeared, and then reappeared along with the second identical sedan, both vehicles occupying the same intersection at slightly offset positions. They continued through the frame together, twin vehicles in impossible synchronization, and then there were 3, then 4, until the intersection was filled with dark sedans, all identical, all moving through the same path with microsecond variations in timing. Then, abruptly, they all disappeared. The intersection returned to empty nighttime streets, and the timestamp jumped forward by 3 minutes, as though the entire sequence had been excised from reality. Jesus Christ, Nadine whispered. I've been reviewing traffic footage for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like that. What the hell happened to that car? It got caught in a loop, Lenora said. Time folded over on itself, and the car just kept repeating the same moment over and over until there were multiple versions of it existing simultaneously. That's not possible. And yet, you just watched it happen. Rooker pointed at the screen. Can you track that vehicle? Get a plate number, find out who was driving? Nadine worked the controls, zooming in on the clearest image of the sedan before it began looping. The license plate was visible but distorted, the numbers shifting and changing each time she enhanced the image. The plate's not reading consistently. Sometimes it shows as HJK 4729, sometimes it shows as HJK 4792, sometimes completely different sequences. Like the vehicle itself doesn't have a stable identity. What about the driver? Can you get a clear shot of their face? Nadine isolated several frames showing the driver through the windshield. She enhanced them, sharpening the image until facial features became visible. Then she enhanced them further, and Lenora felt her stomach drop. The driver was Thomas Ellery, not someone who looked like him, not a relative or doppelganger. It was unmistakably Thomas Ellery, the man who'd been arrested at 4725 Berkshire Lane just hours ago, the man who was currently in county lockup awaiting psychiatric evaluation. But this footage was from 3 weeks ago, which meant Thomas had been experiencing the time loops long before the night he'd attacked his wife. Or had he attacked her? If time was looping, if multiple versions of events were happening simultaneously, then maybe the Thomas who'd been arrested was from a different iteration, a different loop in the sequence. Maybe there were multiple Thomas Ellerys, all existing at slightly different points in the timeline, all experiencing the same nightmare from different perspectives. This is insane, Nadine said. If I show this to my supervisor, they'll think I doctored the footage. Hell, I'm looking right at it and I'm not sure I believe it's real. It's real. Rooker's voice was grim. And it's getting worse. That footage is from 3 weeks ago. We need to check more recent data, see if the anomalies are increasing in frequency or intensity. Nadine pulled up footage from the past week. The loops were more frequent now, appearing almost nightly. Different vehicles, different drivers, but all showing the same pattern: repetition, multiplication, and then sudden disappearance. Sometimes the loops lasted only a few seconds. Sometimes they continued for minutes, creating dozens or hundreds of copies before collapsing back to a single reality. And the epicenter was always the same. Every loop originated from vehicles traveling on or near Berkshire Lane. Every anomaly radiated outward from 4725, affecting a gradually expanding radius that had grown from a single block to nearly a quarter mile over the past 3 weeks. It's spreading, Lenora said. Whatever's happening at that house, it's affecting a larger area over time. And not just affecting vehicles. Rooker pointed to a different section of footage showing pedestrians on the sidewalk. Look at this. A jogger ran past the traffic camera. Early morning exercise routine. Normal, unremarkable. But then the same jogger ran past again. And again. And again. By the 6th repetition, the jogger had noticed something was wrong. Their head turned, looking back toward where they'd come from, expression confused and frightened. But they kept running, kept looping through the same intersection, kept experiencing the same few seconds over and over, while the world around them continued forward. How many people are trapped in those loops? Nadine asked. How many people are experiencing the same moment repeatedly without anyone realizing it? No way to know, Rooker said. But if the affected radius is expanding, eventually it's going to overlap with the major population centers. Schools, shopping centers, the highway. When that happens, the loops won't be isolated incidents that get dismissed as camera glitches. They'll be mass casualties. Lenora felt the weight of that realization settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about a haunted house or a domestic violence call gone wrong. This was about a fundamental break in the structure of reality, a wound in time that was bleeding out into the surrounding area, affecting more people every day. And the department wasn't investigating it, wasn't even acknowledging it as real, because the evidence was too impossible to fit into their existing frameworks. We need to document everything, she said. Every piece of footage showing loops, every timestamp anomaly, every report of strange experiences in that neighborhood. Build a case that's too comprehensive to dismiss. And then what? Nadine closed her laptop, her expression troubled. Take it to the watch commander who already thinks you're experiencing mass hysteria? Take it to IA who's ready to put you both on permanent psychological leave? There's no protocol for this. No procedure for reporting that a residential neighborhood is breaking the laws of physics. Then we go around the department. Media, academic researchers, anyone who might actually investigate instead of just filing it away as an anomaly. Rooker stood up, dropping cash on the table to cover their untouched food. But first, we need to go back to the house, tonight, after dark, when there's less chance of being seen. We need to understand what's at the center of all this before we can figure out how to stop it. Stop it? Nadine stared at him. You think you can stop it? Whatever's happening to time in that neighborhood, it's been building for weeks at minimum. It's affecting electronic systems, traffic patterns, probably people's perceptions and memories, too. What makes you think 2 suspended cops and a traffic analyst can fix something like that? Because we're the only ones who know it needs fixing, Lenora said quietly. Everyone else is dismissing it, ignoring it, hoping it'll go away on its own. But it won't. It's spreading, getting stronger, affecting more people. If we don't at least try to understand it and contain it, eventually the loops are going to overlap with downtown, with the highway, with everywhere. And when that happens, the whole city will be caught in a temporal feedback loop with no way out. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of the situation sinking in. Somewhere in the diner, a radio played old country music. A waitress refilled coffee cups with mechanical efficiency. Life continued its normal patterns, oblivious to the fact that reality itself was unraveling just a few miles away. Finally, Nadine nodded. "Okay, I'm in, but we need equipment, cameras, audio recorders, GPS trackers, anything that might document what happens at that location, and we need a plan for if things go wrong." "Things are already wrong," Rooker said. "But I get your point. If we're going back to ground zero, we need to be prepared for the possibility that we might get caught in the loops ourselves. That means dead man switches, external monitoring, people who know where we are and can raise the alarm if we don't check in." They spent the next hour planning the operation like it was a tactical entry, mapping out approach routes and fallback positions and communication protocols. Lenora felt the surreality of the situation washing over her. She was planning to illegally enter a crime scene during her suspension, with the goal of investigating a temporal anomaly that officially didn't exist, based on evidence that the department had dismissed as equipment failure and stress-induced hallucination. But the alternative was doing nothing, and she'd heard Thomas Ellery's words on that 911 call, heard the genuine terror in his voice as he described being trapped in loops, watching himself repeat the same actions over and over. She'd heard June's panic, heard the echo speaking in her own voice from moments that hadn't happened yet. This was real, regardless of what IA wanted to believe, and ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen, expecting Marlowe or one of the other dispatchers checking in on her. Instead, the message was from her own number. The text read, "Don't go back to the house, it's too late for us." Lenora stared at the message, ice forming in her chest. She checked the timestamp. The text had been sent at 11:47 a.m., but it was currently 10:23 a.m. The message had come from her own phone, from a version of herself 90 minutes in the future, warning her about something that hadn't happened yet. She showed the screen to Rooker and Nadine without saying anything. They read the message, and she saw her own fear reflected in their expressions. "It's already affecting us," Rooker said quietly. "We left the house hours ago, but we're still caught in its influence. Time is looping around us, creating future versions that can send messages backward." "Then maybe we should listen to the warning," Nadine said. "If a future version of you says it's too late, maybe we should believe her." But Lenora was already shaking her head. "Or maybe that's exactly what the house wants, for us to give up, to not investigate, to let it continue spreading without resistance. If a future version of me sent that message, she did it knowing I'd see it now, knowing I'd have the choice to either heed the warning or ignore it." "And which choice are you making?" Rooker asked. Lenora looked at the message again, at those words sent from a future that might or might not happen, from a version of herself that had already made the decision she was about to make. "I'm going to the house tonight. Whether that's what my future self wanted or whether it's a mistake, I won't know until I get there." Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her own number, timestamp showing 11:48 a.m. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that. See you there. Or see you here. Time doesn't really work anymore, so who knows?" Lenora showed them the second message, and Nadine laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Your future self is sending you encouragement from 90 minutes ahead. This is the most insane thing I've ever been part of, and I once investigated a 16-car pileup where every driver swore the traffic light had been all three colors simultaneously. "Welcome to the new reality," Rooker said, "where the rules don't apply and the timeline is negotiable." They left the diner and split up, each heading home to rest and gather equipment for the night's investigation. Lenora drove through morning traffic that seemed normal on the surface but felt fundamentally wrong somehow, like she was watching a recording of reality rather than experiencing it directly. Every traffic light, every turn, every familiar landmark felt slightly off, not quite aligned with her memory of how things should be. At home, she tried to sleep but found herself staring at the ceiling, listening to the echo that still whispered in her head. It was speaking constantly now, a continuous stream of her own thoughts arriving fractionally before she thought them, creating a feedback loop that made it impossible to distinguish between original impulses and their echoes. Was she thinking about going to the house? Or was that thought just the echo of a decision she'd already made in some other timeline? Her phone showed 12 new messages, all from her own number, all with timestamps from the future. Some were supportive, some were warnings, some were just fragments of thought that didn't make sense. The basement is the key. Don't trust the recordings. We're already there. Time circles back to the beginning. Each message added to the confusion, made it harder to maintain a coherent sense of causality. She gave up on sleep and started gathering equipment: her personal video camera, a digital audio recorder, a GPS tracker she'd bought for hiking, extra batteries, a notebook and pen for documentation that wouldn't rely on electronics. As she packed, she heard her own voice speaking from the bedroom. "You forgot the flashlight." Lenora froze. She was alone in the apartment. There was no one else who could have spoken. But the voice had been clear, unmistakable. Her own voice giving advice from where? From another room? From another time? From a version of herself that existed just slightly out of phase with consensus reality? She grabbed a flashlight from the closet and added it to her bag. "Thank you," her own voice said from somewhere behind her. Lenora didn't turn around. She didn't want to see if there was another version of herself standing there. Didn't want to confirm that she'd split into multiple iterations, occupying the same space at different points in time. The echo was bad enough. Seeing herself would be too much. But as she left the apartment, she caught a glimpse in the hallway mirror. Just for a moment, just a flicker, she saw herself standing in the reflection. Not her current self, but another version, wearing different clothes, with an expression that suggested she'd seen things that this version of Lenora hadn't experienced yet. The reflection raised one hand in a wave, almost friendly, almost sad. Then it was gone, and Lenora was alone again. Or as alone as anyone could be when they were constantly echoed by future and past versions of themselves existing in temporal superposition. She drove back to the station to meet Rooker and Nadine, the afternoon sun casting long shadows that seemed to move wrong, stretching and contracting in ways that didn't match the position of the light source. Other drivers seemed unaware of it, going about their routines like reality was still functioning normally. Maybe for them it was. Maybe the temporal corruption only affected people who'd been exposed to whatever was wrong with 4725 Berkshire Lane. Or maybe it was affecting everyone, and most people just couldn't perceive it yet. Rooker was waiting in the parking structure with his truck loaded with equipment. Nadine pulled up moments later in her sedan, her laptop bag and several cases of electronic monitoring equipment visible through the back window. They transferred everything into Rooker's truck, arranging it to be easily accessible, then stood together looking at the setting sun. "Last chance to back out," Rooker said. "Once we go back to that house, there's no guarantee we'll come out the same people who went in. Time might loop us, split us into multiple versions, trap us in repeated moments. We could end up like Thomas Ellery, unable to distinguish between past and present and future. "We're already there," Lenora said, echoing one of her future self's messages. The moment we responded to that initial call, we became part of whatever's happening at that location. Backing out now wouldn't undo our exposure. It would just mean we're affected without understanding why. Nadine nodded. "And if this spreads to the point where the whole city is caught in temporal loops, I'd rather be someone who tried to stop it than someone who looked away." They climbed into the truck and headed toward Berkshire Lane as the sun disappeared below the horizon, taking with it the last remnants of normal time. Night fell, or maybe night had already fallen hours ago, or would fall in a few minutes, or was falling in multiple simultaneous moments that all existed at once. The closer they got to their destination, the harder it became to maintain a coherent sense of causality. Rooker's watch was running backward. The truck's dashboard clock was frozen at 8:43. Nadine's phone showed a date 3 weeks in the past. And somewhere ahead of them, 4725 Berkshire Lane waited. The epicenter of an impossible event that was rewriting the rules of reality one temporal loop at a time. "Whatever happens in there," Rooker said as they turned onto Berkshire Lane, "we document everything. Even if we get caught in loops, even if we split into multiple versions, we keep recording. Someone needs to understand what's happening here." The house appeared ahead, dark and silent, exactly as it had been hours ago or days ago or always, existing in an eternal present moment that recycled itself endlessly. Police tape still blocked the entrance, but there were no officers stationed outside, no indication that anyone was monitoring the location. The department had processed the scene and moved on, filing the case away as a domestic violence arrest with some unusual technical malfunctions that would be explained away in the reports. They parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, keeping to the shadows, equipment bags slung over their shoulders. The street was quiet, residential windows glowing with the warm light of normal evening routines. Normal people having normal dinners, watching normal television, living normal lives untouched by the knowledge that reality itself was unraveling just outside their doors. Lenora felt the echo intensifying with each step closer to the house. Her future self was speaking constantly now, delivering a running commentary that matched her current thoughts with microsecond precision, creating a disorienting stereo effect that made it difficult to move in a straight line. She stumbled, and Rooker caught her elbow. "You okay?" The echo's getting stronger. I'm hearing myself think before I think it. Causality is breaking down. Lenora pulled out her audio recorder and started documenting. It's 8:47 p.m. by my watch, though Nadine's phone shows it's 8:12 and the truck's clock said 8:43. We're approaching 4725 Berkshire Lane to investigate temporal anomalies. Current symptoms include auditory hallucinations, timeline confusion, and possible future self messages via text. They reached the front door, and Rooker pulled out a lockpick set. Breaking and entering during suspension. Pretty sure this violates about 6 different department policies. Good thing we're already suspended then. Nadine set up a camera on a tripod facing the door, positioning it to capture their entry. For the record, I'm here of my own volition, investigating what I believe to be a legitimate public safety threat. The lock clicked open, and they stepped inside 4725 Berkshire Lane. And time shattered. The interior of 4725 Berkshire Lane existed in multiple states simultaneously. Lenora stepped through the doorway and found herself standing in 3 different versions of the foyer at once, one with lights on, one in complete darkness, one illuminated by the strobing red and blue of emergency vehicles that weren't currently outside. She could see all 3 overlaid on top of each other, transparent and solid at the same time, occupying the same physical space but in different temporal moments. Rooker moved past her, his flashlight beam cutting through the layered realities, creating strange refraction patterns where it intersected with light sources from other timelines. The structure is stable. Whatever's happening, it's not affecting the physical building, just our perception of when we are inside it. When, not where, Nadine murmured, setting up monitoring equipment just inside the door. Her laptop screen flickered, showing timestamp data that scrolled backward and forward simultaneously. I'm reading at least 7 distinct time signatures in this immediate area. Some are minutes apart, some are hours. One is showing as 3 weeks in the past. Lenora pulled out her audio recorder, but when she pressed record, the device showed it had already been recording for 47 minutes despite having just been turned on. The counter continued climbing, 48 minutes, 49, while simultaneously showing 0 minutes elapsed. Both readings were true. Both were happening. They moved deeper into the house, each step taking them further from linear causality and into something that operated by different rules entirely. In the living room, Lenora saw furniture in multiple positions. The couch against the north wall, the east wall, the south wall, all at once. A coffee table that was both broken and intact. A television playing 3 different programs on the same screen, the audio bleeding together into incomprehensible noise. And people, transparent figures moving through their daily routines, unaware they were being observed. Thomas Ellery sitting on the couch reading a newspaper from last Tuesday. June Ellery making coffee in the kitchen from this morning. Both of them arguing in the bedroom from 6 weeks ago. All of these moments happening simultaneously, layered on top of each other like frames of film that had been exposed multiple times. They're trapped, Rooker said quietly. These aren't recordings or residual energy. These are actual versions of Thomas and June, still living through these moments on an endless loop. Nadine's equipment was going haywire, sensors detecting motion and heat signatures from multiple timelines at once. I'm reading 17 distinct human presences in this house. Most of them are Thomas or June from different points in time. But there's others too. Previous owners, maybe. Or future owners. Time isn't flowing in one direction here. It's pooling, creating eddies and currents where past and future mix together. Lenora heard her own voice speaking from upstairs. Not the echo this time, but an actual conversation. Her words from the 911 call playing out in real time, even though that call had ended hours ago. June, I need you to stay calm and tell me where you are. And June's panicked response, cycling through its loop. He's going to kill me. Please send help, please. The basement, Lenora said. Thomas mentioned the basement. That's where he went when the power went out. That's where he said things started to go wrong. If there's an epicenter to all this, it'll be down there. They found the basement door near the kitchen, exactly where Rooker had described it from his initial response to the call. The door was open in one timeline, closed in another, locked in a third. Rooker reached for the handle, and his hand passed through 3 different versions of the door before finding purchase on the one that existed in their current moment, or at least the moment they were choosing to perceive as current. The stairs descended into darkness that was somehow deeper than normal darkness, like they were descending not just into a lower floor, but into a lower layer of reality itself. Lenora's flashlight beam bent wrong going down the steps, the light refracting through temporal boundaries she couldn't see but could feel, creating rainbow patterns in the air like oil on water. The basement was unfinished concrete and exposed pipes, exactly as Rooker had described, but it was also fully finished with drywall and carpeting, and it was also flooded with 2 feet of standing water. And it was also on fire, flames that gave off no heat consuming walls that weren't burning in other timelines. All versions existed simultaneously, overlapping and contradicting, and somehow all being true at once. In the center of the basement was the source. It looked like nothing at first, just a point in space that was slightly wrong, slightly off, like a dead pixel in reality's display. But as Lenora stared at it, her perception began to adjust and she could see it properly, or at least as properly as human senses could perceive something that existed outside normal space-time. It was a hole, not a physical hole that you could fall through, but a hole in causality itself, a point where the normal flow of time had been punctured and was now bleeding out in all directions. Events leaked from it like water from a crack in a dam, spilling into the surrounding area and creating the loops, the echoes, the overlapping timelines. The hole was small, no bigger than a fist, but it was growing. Lenora could see it expanding in slow motion, consuming more of the basement's temporal stability with each moment. What caused this? Nadine whispered. What could punch a hole in time itself? Rooker moved closer, his flashlight illuminating the area around the anomaly. The concrete floor was cracked in a perfect circle around the hole, and within that circle Lenora could see fragments of what looked like electrical equipment, melted wire, scorched circuit boards, the shattered remains of something that had once been electronic. There was a device here, something that generated a field strong enough to disrupt space-time, and when it failed, or overloaded, or whatever happened to it, it created this. But who would build something like that? Why? Lenora was documenting everything with her camera, capturing images that would probably be impossible to develop or display properly, but at least creating a record. Maybe it was an accident. Nadine's instruments were screaming warnings, detecting radiation levels and electromagnetic fields that shouldn't exist. Some kind of amateur physics experiment that went wrong, or maybe someone was trying to create something else entirely and stumbled onto this by mistake. A voice spoke from behind them, and they all spun around to find Thomas Ellery standing on the stairs. Not the Thomas they'd arrested earlier, and not one of the transparent loop versions from upstairs. This was a Thomas who looked older, more worn, with deep circles under his eyes and a tremor in his hands. It wasn't an accident. I built it on purpose. Or I will build it. Or I'm building it right now in another timeline. Causality is relative here. Rooker's hand moved to his weapon, but Thomas raised his hands in a placating gesture. I'm not going to hurt you. I can't hurt you. That version of me that attacked my wife and grabbed your partner's gun, he's from a different iteration, a different loop. This version of me understands what's happening. This version wants to help. Help how? Lenora asked, keeping her distance. By explaining why you created a device that's destroying the fabric of reality. Thomas descended the stairs slowly, moving like every step caused him pain. I was trying to save June. She was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 18 months ago. The doctors gave her 6 months to live. I'm an electrical engineer. I worked for a defense contractor on experimental communication systems. And I thought, if quantum entanglement allows particles to communicate across space-time, maybe I could build something that would let me communicate with my past self. Warn myself about the cancer earlier so we could catch it in time. He gestured toward the hole in reality. I built a quantum field generator in my basement. The theory was sound. Create a localized temporal distortion that would let information propagate backward through time. Send a message to myself 6 months earlier, early enough to insist June get screened, early enough to save her life. But the field was unstable. When I activated it, instead of creating a controlled channel for information, it punched a hole straight through space-time. And once the hole was there, it started growing. Time began leaking out, creating loops and echoes and overlapping moments. Where's June now? Rooker asked. The real June, from your original timeline? Thomas's expression crumbled. She's dead. She died 4 months ago, right on schedule, exactly when the doctors said she would. But the hole created so many versions of her. so many loops of moments we spent together, that sometimes I can't remember which timeline I'm in. Sometimes I think she's still alive because I can see her upstairs making breakfast from last Tuesday. Sometimes I know she's dead because I was at her funeral. Both are true. Neither are true. The whole has made truth negotiable. Nadine was studying the anomaly with her instruments, taking readings that probably violated several laws of physics. Can it be closed? Can we seal the hole and stop the temporal leakage? I've tried. Thomas moved closer to the device, or what remained of it. I've tried destroying the generator, disrupting the field, everything I could think of. But the hole exists outside the normal flow of time now. Destroying the device that created it doesn't undo the damage because from the hole's perspective, the device is still operating, will always be operating, has never stopped operating. Past, present, and future are meaningless concepts to it. Lenora felt the weight of that realization settling on her. If the hole couldn't be closed, if it would continue growing and consuming more of the city into its temporal chaos, then eventually everyone would be caught in the loops. Everyone would exist in multiple timelines simultaneously, unable to distinguish between past and present and future, unable to maintain a coherent identity across different iterations of themselves. There has to be something we can do, she said, some way to contain it, to stop it from spreading. Thomas shook his head. It's already spreading. You felt it the moment you responded to my wife's 911 call. You carried it with you when you left. It's in your equipment now, in your perceptions, in your understanding of causality. You're infected with temporal instability, and it'll continue spreading through everyone you interact with. Rooker's watch was running backward faster now, seconds peeling away at an accelerating rate. The basement around them flickered, shifting between multiple states. Flooded, burning, pristine, destroyed. So we're just supposed to accept that reality is ending, that time itself is breaking down, and there's nothing we can do about it? Not ending, Thomas corrected. Changing. Time isn't breaking down, it's breaking open. All the moments that ever were or will be are becoming accessible simultaneously. Linear causality was always just a convenient fiction we used to make sense of existence. The whole is revealing the truth, that everything happens at once, that past and future are just different directions in space-time, no more separated than up and down. Lenora's audio recorder beeped. She checked it and saw that the recording had reached capacity, 8 hours of audio captured in the 47 minutes since they'd entered the house. She played back a random section and heard her own voice speaking. We need to evacuate the city. Get everyone out of the affected radius before they get caught in the loops. But she hadn't said those words yet. Or maybe she had said them in a timeline that was slightly ahead of this one, and the recorder had picked up the bleed-through. Either way, it was advice from a version of herself who'd already progressed further through this conversation, who'd already reached conclusions this version was still working toward. The affected radius is already too large, Nadine said, checking her laptop. The traffic camera feeds were showing loops everywhere now, not just near Berkshire Lane but spreading outward in concentric circles. Cars repeating their journeys, pedestrians walking the same blocks endlessly, entire sections of the city caught in temporal eddies. It's grown to almost 2 miles in diameter. That's 20,000 people minimum, all experiencing time non-linearly now, and it's still expanding. Rooker pulled out his phone and tried to call the station, but the call wouldn't connect. Or it had already connected, in a different timeline, or it would connect in 5 minutes. The phone's display showed all 3 states at once, and when Rooker spoke, Lenora heard his words echoing from multiple points in time. This is Officer Rooker. We have a code 1033 situation at 4725 Berkshire Lane, requesting immediate, the transmission cut off. looped back, repeated from a slightly different position in space-time. "They won't believe you anyway," Thomas said. "I tried to warn people weeks ago. I called the police, the fire department, even the CDC, thinking maybe it was some kind of contamination event. They all dismissed it as equipment malfunction or psychological distress. The human mind isn't built to accept that reality can just stop working properly. People will rationalize anything to avoid acknowledging that the fundamental rules have changed." Lenora watched the hole pulse and grow, watched it consume another fraction of the basement's stability. In a few hours, it would encompass the entire house. In a few days, the entire neighborhood. In a few weeks, the city. And there was nothing they could do to stop it because stopping something required linear time, required cause to precede effect, and the hole had rendered those concepts meaningless. Unless, what if we go in? Lenora heard herself say the words, and simultaneously heard them echo back from her future self, creating a strange harmony. What if we enter the hole directly, go to whatever's on the other side? Maybe from inside we can understand it better, find a way to stabilize it or at least slow its growth. Thomas stared at her. "You can't go in there. No one knows what's on the other side. It might be void, might be some other dimension, might be time itself in its raw, unstructured form. You could cease to exist, or exist in all moments simultaneously, or fragment into infinite versions across infinite timelines." "We're already fragmenting," Rooker said quietly. He held up his hands, and Lenora saw what he meant. His fingers were slightly translucent, and through them she could see other versions of his hands, from other timelines, all occupying the same space. Every moment we spend in proximity to the whole, we're splitting into more iterations. Eventually, we'll be so diffuse across different timelines that we won't be able to maintain coherent consciousness in any of them. Nadine was nodding slowly. "And if we're going to fragment anyway, we might as well do it deliberately. Enter the hole, experience whatever's on the other side, and hope that from that perspective we can perceive solutions we can't see from this side." "This is insane," Thomas said. "You're talking about stepping into a rupture in space-time with no idea what it'll do to you." "Everything's already insane," Lenora replied. "Reality stopped making sense the moment I heard that echo on the 911 call. At least this way we're choosing how we interact with the insanity instead of just being victims of it." She approached the hole, and as she got closer she could feel it pulling at her, not physically, but temporally. It wanted her to enter, wanted to absorb her into its nonlinear existence, wanted to show her what time looked like when it wasn't constrained by human perception and the arrow of causality. She could hear voices emanating from it. Her own voice, Rooker's voice. Voices of people she'd never met, all speaking in overlapping echoes that created a harmony that was almost musical. Rooker came to stand beside her. "If we do this, there's no guarantee we come back. No guarantee we stay ourselves." "We're not ourselves anymore anyway," Lenora said. "I've got versions of me scattered across dozens of timelines, all experiencing different moments, all thinking different thoughts. At least in there, maybe all those versions can exist in one place." Nadine joined them, her equipment abandoned on the concrete floor. "For what it's worth, my readings suggest the whole leads somewhere. Not void, not nothing, but some kind of structure. Whether that structure is survivable by human consciousness is another question entirely." They stood together at the edge of the temporal rupture. Three people who'd started their day as ordinary civil servants and were ending it by voluntarily stepping outside the normal flow of time. Lenora thought about all the other versions of herself. The version still sitting at the dispatch console. The version being interviewed by IA. The version sending text messages from the future. The version that would eventually write reports about this incident in language that made sense to people who still believed in linear causality. All those versions were her. All those moments were happening simultaneously. And by entering the hole, maybe she could experience them all at once instead of being fragmented across them. "On three," Rooker said. "1, 2, 3. They stepped forward together, and reality shattered completely. The watch commander found their equipment 3 days later, set up in the basement of 4725 Berkshire Lane, exactly where they'd left it. The cameras were still recording. The audio equipment was still running. The laptop showed thousands of hours of footage captured in the 72 hours since they'd entered the house. All of it showing the same basement from slightly different temporal perspectives. But Lenora Pike, Thad Rooker, and Nadine Arledge were gone. Not dead. Their vital signs monitors showed steady heartbeats and respiration, but the sensors couldn't locate the source. The readings suggested they were still in the basement, but also in the living room, but also outside on the street, but also nowhere at all. Their GPS trackers showed positions scattered across the city, across the state, across timelines that didn't align with any known moment in history. The Internal Affairs investigation concluded that they'd experienced a psychotic break triggered by carbon monoxide exposure and had fled the scene. Their personnel files were flagged for a psychiatric evaluation pending their eventual discovery. The equipment malfunctions were attributed to electrical interference from the storm damage in the area. But Marlo Fitch, working the dispatch console late one night, received a 911 call that showed no originating number. When he answered, he heard Lenora's voice, clear and calm. 911, what's your emergency? And then silence. The call lasted 17 hours according to the system logs, but only 3 seconds passed on his watch. And Officer Keaton Sorrell, driving patrol alone after Rooker's disappearance, heard his former partner's voice on the radio giving him advice on a traffic stop. Advice that Rooker couldn't possibly have known to give because the situation hadn't developed yet. The words came from the future, bleeding backward through time, helping Sorrell avoid a confrontation that would have turned violent. And Violet Cormack, reviewing traffic camera footage months later, saw 3 transparent figures standing at the intersection near 4725 Berkshire Lane. They were there in every frame, every moment, every timeline captured by the cameras, Lenora and Rooker and Nadine, existing as constant presences across all possible versions of time, watching but not interfering, present but not participating. The hole continued to grow. The affected radius expanded to 3 miles, then 5, then 10. More people began experiencing the echoes, the loops, the temporal bleed-through. But they learned to live with it the way people learn to live with any fundamental change to reality. They adapted. They found ways to function in a world where time wasn't linear anymore, where past and present and future all happened at once. And sometimes, when the loops aligned just right, dispatchers working the 911 center would hear Lenora's voice guiding them through difficult calls. Officers on dangerous scenes would hear Rooker's warnings helping them avoid harm. Traffic analysts would receive advice from Nadine about patterns they couldn't yet see but would need to understand. The 3 of them had gone into the hole and hadn't come out because they couldn't come out, not in any conventional sense. They existed there now, spread across all moments simultaneously, able to perceive and influence events from their position outside normal time, but unable to return to any single timeline. They had become the echo. The voice that spoke before words were said, the warning that came before danger was visible, the knowledge that existed before learning. They were trapped in every moment at once, experiencing all of time as a single eternal now, unable to return to linear existence but also unable to truly leave. And the hole kept growing. Hollis Brandt sat in his office 6 months later, reviewing the final reports on the Berkshire Lane incident. The case was officially closed. Equipment malfunction, carbon monoxide exposure, 3 missing persons presumed to have suffered psychological breaks and fled the jurisdiction. Clean, rational explanations that fit within the department's framework for understanding reality. But his watch was running backward. Had been for weeks now, ever since he'd reviewed the body camera footage from that night. He'd tried replacing the battery, tried different watches, even tried keeping time with his phone. Every device showed the same progression: seconds ticking backward, minutes unwinding, hours reversing their flow. He'd stopped mentioning it to anyone, stopped trying to explain, because he knew what it meant. The temporal instability from 4725 Berkshire Lane was spreading through everyone who'd been exposed to the evidence, the recordings, the documentation. The infection traveled not through physical proximity but through information, through the act of perceiving and attempting to understand what had happened. His phone rang. He answered without checking the caller ID. "Lieutenant Brandt." The voice was Lenora Pike's, but layered somehow, like multiple versions of her speaking in perfect synchronization. "I need you to listen carefully. In 3 days, the affected radius will reach the city limits. Within a week, it'll cross state lines. Within a month, it'll be global. Time itself is breaking down, and there's nothing we can do to stop it from this side." "This side?" Brandt gripped the phone tighter. "Where are you?" "Everywhere, everywhen. We're in the space between moments, watching all of time at once, and we're seeing what comes next." Her voice carried an edge of something that might have been fear or might have been wonder. "Humanity isn't going to end, Lieutenant, but humanity's experience of time is going to change. Linear causality was always temporary, always a local phenomenon that would eventually break down. The whole is just accelerating what was always going to happen. What do we do? How do we prepare for that? You don't. You can't. When time becomes nonlinear, preparation loses all meaning because you're simultaneously preparing, executing, and remembering. The best you can do is help people understand that they're not going crazy when they start experiencing echoes and loops, that they're just perceiving time the way it actually is, instead of the simplified version we evolved to process." The call disconnected, but Brandt's phone showed it had lasted -3 minutes. It had ended before it began, or would begin after it ended, or was still ongoing in some timeline that intersected with this one at an angle he couldn't perceive. He looked at his watch. It showed 3:11, the exact time when this had all started, when Lenora Pike had first heard the echo on the 911 call. And Brandt realized with a cold certainty that he was caught in the same loop now, that he would always be in this moment, that 3:11 would repeat forever across infinite iterations while simultaneously never happening at all. The echo spoke in his own voice, slightly ahead of his thoughts. "We're all in the loop now. We always were. We always will be." Eamon Kells had been working the overnight shift at the county 911 center for 8 years, and in that time he'd learned to recognize the different qualities of silence. There was the comfortable silence of a slow night when nothing much was happening, just the occasional drunk driver or domestic dispute. There was the tense silence before a major incident, when the air seemed to hold its breath waiting for something to break. And then there was this silence, the kind that came after a storm, when the power grid was still sorting itself out and half the county was sitting in the dark wondering when their lights would come back on. The thunderstorm had rolled through Mercy County around 10 p.m., bringing with it the kind of wind and rain that turned county roads into rivers and knocked down power lines like they were made of string. The 911 center had been flooded with calls for the first 2 hours. Trees down, flooded basements, A few minor accidents where people had hydroplaned on the slick roads. But now, at 2:30 in the morning, things had quieted down. The worst of the storm had passed, moving east toward the state line, leaving behind that particular stillness that only came in rural areas where civilization was spread thin and darkness was still the default state. Eamon sat at his console, monitoring the quiet channels, sipping coffee that had gone lukewarm an hour ago. The 911 center for Mercy County wasn't like the big urban facilities with dozens of operators and constant activity. This was a 4-person operation covering 800 square miles of farmland, forest, and the occasional small town. On the overnight shift, it was usually just Eamon and maybe one other dispatcher handling calls from a population that barely cracked 15,000 people. The phone rang. Not his cell phone or the administrative line, but the 911 emergency line. Eamon clicked to accept the call, pulling up the automatic location data on his screen. 911, what's your emergency? Static answered him. Heavy, crackling static that sounded like the call was coming through damaged lines, which wasn't surprising given the storm. Through the interference, he could barely make out what might have been wind, or might have been breathing, or might have been nothing at all. 911, can you hear me? If you can hear me but can't speak, press any button on your phone. Standard procedure for calls where the line was active, but no one was talking. Sometimes it was kids playing with a phone. Sometimes it was someone who was hiding and couldn't risk speaking. Sometimes it was just a pocket dial that had somehow triggered emergency services. The static continued, but through it, Eamon heard something else. A distant ringing sound, like metal on metal, repeating at irregular intervals. Ding, pause, ding ding, pause, ding. Not quite rhythmic enough to be mechanical, but not random enough to be natural. He checked his screen. The call was coming from a landline, which was increasingly rare these days. Most people had gone cellular, especially in rural areas where running phone lines to every isolated farmhouse wasn't always practical. The location data was pulling up, triangulating from the nearest cell towers and landline exchanges. The address that appeared on his screen made Eamon's coffee go cold in his stomach. Milepost 47, County Road 19. The old payphone station. That couldn't be right. The payphone at Milepost 47 had been decommissioned 6 years ago when the state had eliminated rural payphones as part of a cost-cutting measure. Eamon remembered because he'd been the one to take the last legitimate call from that phone, a stranded motorist with a flat tire back in 2017. After that, the phone company had removed the equipment and left just the metal housing, a rusted shell on the side of a county road that barely saw a dozen vehicles on a busy day. There was no way that phone line was still active. No way it could generate a 911 call. And yet, his screen clearly showed an active call originating from that exact location, the phone number matching the records from the decommissioned line. Hello? Is someone there? Eamon kept his voice calm, professional, even as his mind was running through possible explanations. Could be a system error, routing malfunction, some kind of glitch in the phone company's database that was generating ghost calls from old numbers. The storm had probably knocked out half the infrastructure in the county, and weird technical anomalies happened when systems were stressed. The static shifted, and through it came a voice. Distorted, broken up by interference, barely human-sounding. Help? Need? Can't. I can barely hear you. Are you at the payphone on County Road 19? Even as Eamon said it, he knew how ridiculous it sounded. No one was at that payphone because the payphone didn't exist anymore. Stuck. Don't know where. So cold. The voice was male, young-sounding, with an edge of panic that was difficult to fake even through heavy static. Please, anyone, Eamon flagged the call for dispatch and started pulling up information on County Road 19. The road ran north-south through some of the most remote parts of Mercy County, cutting through state forest and agricultural land before eventually connecting to the interstate about 40 miles south. The payphone had been positioned at the halfway point, ostensibly for stranded motorists, but in practice it had been used more by hunters and hikers who needed to call for rides than by anyone with an actual emergency. "I'm sending help to your location, but I need you to tell me what kind of emergency you have. Are you injured? Is your vehicle disabled?" Eamon was already pulling up the duty roster, seeing which patrol units were available. Officer Rhea Donnelly was working the north sector tonight, probably somewhere within 20 minutes of County Road 19 if she pushed it. "Can't see. Everything's dark. The road just..." The voice cut out completely, replaced by more static and that strange metallic ringing. Ding, 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 ding. Eamon switched to the radio. "Control to Unit 7. What's your current location?" Rhea Donnelly's voice came back immediately, clear and alert despite the late hour. "Unit 7 is northbound on Route 46, just past the junction with County Road 12. What have you got, Eamon?" "I need you to check on a possible stranded motorist at milepost 47 on County Road 19. I've got a 911 call from that location, but the line's breaking up badly. Caller sounds disoriented, possibly injured." There was a pause before Rhea responded, and when she did, her voice carried a note of confusion. "Eamon, are you sure about that location? The payphone at milepost 47 was taken out years ago." "I know, but I've got an active call showing as originating from that phone number, and someone's definitely on the line asking for help." Eamon pulled up the call recording, preparing to clip a section of the audio to send to Rhea so she could hear what he was dealing with. Could be someone with a cell phone who's confused about their location, but the system's definitely routing it through the old landline. "Copy that. I'll head that way. Should be on scene in about 15 minutes. Rhea's cruiser engine revved as she accelerated. Weather's still pretty rough out here. Lots of debris on the roads. If someone's stuck, they picked a hell of a night for it. Eamon turned his attention back to the phone call. "Sir, I have an officer heading to your location. Can you tell me your name?" The static cleared for a moment, and the voice came through with startling clarity. "I don't remember. I was driving, and then... I don't know. I can't remember how I got here." "Okay, that's okay. You might have hit your head. Do you remember what kind of vehicle you were driving?" "Dark. Everything's dark. I can hear the phone ringing, but I can't find it. It keeps ringing, and I can't..." The voice dissolved into what sounded like sobbing, but distorted through the static, it was hard to tell if it was genuine distress or just audio artifacts. "Listen to me. You're going to be fine. The officer will be there soon and she'll help you. Just stay where you are. Stay on the line with me." Eamon was logging every detail of the call, noting timestamps and the nature of the interference. Something about this felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. It wasn't just the technical impossibility of the call originating from a decommissioned phone. It was the quality of the voice, the way it seemed to drift in and out of coherence like the speaker wasn't entirely present. The ringing sound was getting louder, more insistent. Ding, 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 ding. Like someone was striking the metal housing of the payphone station over and over, or like the phone itself was ringing in that old mechanical way that payphones used to ring before everything went digital. "Do you hear that ringing?" Eamon asked. "Is that coming from near you?" "It won't stop. I keep trying to answer, but there's no phone, just the box, just the empty box where it used to be." The voice was becoming more agitated. "Why won't it stop ringing?" Eamon felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the 911 center. The caller knew the phone was gone, knew there was just an empty box, which meant either this was someone playing an elaborate prank, or something much stranger was happening out on County Road 19. Unit 7, what's your ETA? Eamon switched back to the radio. About 8 minutes out. Roads are worse than I thought. Got a big tree branch blocking part of County Road 19. Had to detour. Ria's voice was strained with concentration. Are you still in contact with the caller? Affirmative, but the call's getting stranger. The caller seems to know the payphone was removed, but claims to be calling from it anyway. Copy that. I'll proceed with caution. Eamon returned to the 911 line. The static had intensified, becoming a wall of white noise punctuated by that metallic ringing and fragments of voice that might have been the same caller, or might have been something else bleeding through from another line. He thought he heard other voices in the interference, multiple people talking at once, overlapping and unintelligible. Sir, are you still there? Sir? The static cut out abruptly, replaced by perfect silence. Then, with crystal clarity, the voice spoke. Eamon. Every hair on Eamon's arms stood up. He hadn't given his name during the call. Standard procedure was to identify as 911 or emergency services, never by personal name. But the caller had just addressed him directly, speaking his name with perfect pronunciation. How do you know my name? Because you told me. You're going to tell me. You told me 6 years ago when I called from this phone. The voice was calm now, eerily so, like whoever was speaking had just remembered something important. I had a flat tire. It was raining, not as bad as tonight, but enough that I couldn't change it myself. You sent someone to help me. Eamon's mouth went dry. 6 years ago. The last legitimate call from the milepost 47 payphone. A driver with a flat tire on a rainy night. Eamon had taken that call, had sent a tow truck, had stayed on the line with the driver until help arrived. It had been a routine call, nothing memorable about it except that it had been the last time that particular phone had been used before decommissioning. Who are you? Eamon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know anymore. I was someone 6 years ago, but I've been here so long, waiting for the phone to ring again, waiting for someone to answer. Time works differently here. I think I might be stuck. The voice paused. Or maybe I died that night and didn't notice. Maybe the storm got worse after you sent help and I never made it home. Maybe I've been here the whole time, calling, and you're the first person who's answered in 6 years. That's not possible. The phone line was disconnected. There's no way. There's a lot of things that aren't possible, Eamon, but they happen anyway. The voice was fading again, being consumed by returning static. The officer you sent, Ria Donnelly, she's going to find something at the payphone station, but it's not going to be me. Not the me that I was 6 years ago. Tell her to be careful. Tell her the road doesn't go where it used to go. Wait, what does that mean? What's she going to find? The line went dead. Not static, not disconnection, but true silence. The absence of any signal at all. Eamon stared at his screen. The call timer showed the conversation had lasted 11 minutes and 43 seconds. The originating number still showed as the decommissioned payphone at milepost 47. He immediately switched to radio. Unit 7, be advised the caller just disconnected. He said, he gave me some information that doesn't make sense, but he warned that the road might not be safe. Approach with extreme caution. Copy that, Control. I'm about 2 minutes out from milepost 47 now. Ria's voice was professional, calm, but Eamon could hear the edge of concern. Can you elaborate on the warning? He said the road doesn't go where it used to go. I don't know what that means. Well, that's cryptic as hell. I'll keep my eyes open. Eamon pulled up satellite imagery of County Road 19, looking at the stretch where the payphone station was located. The road was straight there, cutting through dense forest with no intersections or turns for miles in either direction. It had been surveyed and paved in the 1960s and hadn't been substantially modified since. There was no reason it would not go where it used to go unless there'd been some kind of washout or collapse from the storm. But something about the caller's words suggested he hadn't been talking about physical road conditions. The radio crackled. "Control, Unit 7 is on scene at milepost 47. I see the old payphone station, just the metal housing like we expected. No visible vehicle, no person in the immediate area. Copy, Unit 7. Can you check the immediate vicinity? The caller might have wandered away from the station." "Will do. Activating spotlight now." Eamon listened to the sound of Ria's cruiser door opening, heard her footsteps on wet pavement through the open radio channel. The spotlight on her vehicle would illuminate a good 100 yards in any direction, more than enough to spot a stranded motorist or disabled vehicle. "Control, I'm at the payphone housing. The metal box is intact, door's been torn off its hinges, but that probably happened years ago. No phone equipment inside, just some old wiring and what looks like a wasp nest." Ria's breathing was slightly elevated from the walk. "Checking the surrounding area now." Eamon pulled up the call logs, scrolling back through 6 years of records until he found it. The last legitimate call from milepost 47. October 12, 2017, 11:47 p.m. Caller reported flat tire, requested assistance. Tow truck dispatched, arrived on scene 28 minutes later. Driver was... Eamon clicked through to the incident report. Driver was assisted with tire change. No further action required. No name recorded for the driver, just a notation that they'd been helped and had continued on their way. Routine. Forgettable. Except now that same caller had somehow contacted him from a phone that didn't exist anymore, claiming to have been waiting for 6 years, claiming that time worked differently where he was, claiming that he might be dead and not know it. The radio came alive with Ria's voice, tense and confused. "Control, I need you to pull up the map data for County Road 19 at milepost 47. Something's wrong here." "What do you see, Unit 7? "The road, Eamon. The road past the payphone station. According to my GPS, I'm at the right location, but the pavement just ends. About 50 feet past the payphone, the road turns into nothing. Not washed out, not collapsed. It's like it was never built beyond this point." Ria's flashlight was sweeping across something that Eamon couldn't see but could hear in the quality of her voice. Genuine unease. "But my map shows County Road 19 continuing for another 20 miles south from here. Either my GPS is wrong or reality is wrong, and I'm really hoping it's the GPS." Eamon was already pulling up the county GIS system, accessing the official road maps and comparing them to satellite imagery. According to every database, County Road 19 ran uninterrupted from the state forest in the north all the way to the interstate in the south. The satellite photos, dated from last month, clearly showed the paved road cutting through the landscape. But those photos had been taken during the day, in good weather, from high altitude. They wouldn't necessarily show recent changes or storm damage. "Unit 7, can you describe exactly what you're seeing? Is it a washout? A sinkhole? What?" "Neither. That's what's weird about it. The pavement just stops like someone drew a line and said, 'This is where the road ends.' Beyond that is grass, Eamon. Not dirt, not gravel, not torn-up asphalt. Just grass. Like the road was never extended past this point, but I can see tire tracks in the mud near the edge. Recent tracks that go right up to where the pavement ends and then just disappear." Eamon felt that chill again. Stronger this time. "Tire tracks that disappear? That's what I'm seeing. And there's something else, the payphone, it's ringing. The payphone is decommissioned, Unit 7. There's no equipment to generate a ring. I know that, Eamon. I'm standing right here looking at an empty metal box that shouldn't be capable of making any sound. And it's ringing, that old mechanical bell sound, like payphones used to make. Ding, 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 ding. Ria's voice had gone very quiet. Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on out here? Eamon's screen lit up with an incoming 911 call. He glanced at the location data and his heart stuttered. The call was originating from the milepost 47 payphone, again. Unit 7, stay on the line but don't hang up. I've got another incoming call from that location. Eamon clicked to accept the 911 call, routing it to a separate audio channel so he could monitor both simultaneously. 911, what's your emergency? Static. The same heavy, crackling static from before. And through it, a voice. But not the same voice as the first caller. This voice was female. Older. With a thick accent that Eamon couldn't quite place. I'm lost, the woman said. I've been driving for hours, but I can't find the road. The signs all say County Road 19, but nothing looks right. Everything's different. Ma'am, what's your current location? Are you calling from the payphone at milepost 47? I don't know where I am. I stopped to use the phone to call my daughter, but when I picked it up, I got you instead. Where am I? This doesn't look like Kentucky anymore. Kentucky? Ma'am, you're in Mercer County, about 2 hours north of the Kentucky border. How long have you been driving? Since, I don't remember. It was morning when I left Louisville, but it's been dark for so long now. Days, maybe. I keep following the road, but it doesn't go anywhere. The woman's voice was shaking. I'm so tired. I need to find somewhere to stop, but there's nothing here. No houses, no gas stations, nothing. Just the road and the trees and this phone that keeps ringing. On the radio channel, Eamon heard Ria swear softly. Control, the payphone just stopped ringing, and I can hear a woman's voice coming from inside the housing. Not through a speaker. It's like the sound is emanating from the metal itself. Unit 7, be advised I have an active 911 call from that location. Female caller, disoriented, claims to have been driving for days. Days? Eamon, I can hear her, but there's no one here. The voice is coming from the payphone, but there's no equipment. No way for sound to be transmitted. This is... Ria trailed off, and Eamon heard her breathing quicken. Control, I think I need backup. This situation is beyond my scope. Ma'am, Eamon addressed the female caller. I have an officer at the payphone location right now. Can you see her? She's in a patrol vehicle with lights on. I can't see anything. It's so dark. The phone is the only thing I can hear, the only thing that seems real anymore. The woman's voice was fading, becoming distant. I just want to go home. I just want to find the road that leads home. Ma'am, stay with me. What's your name? Avis. Avis Trammell. I was going to visit my daughter in Tennessee, but I got turned around somewhere and now I can't find my way back to anywhere. A pause. Oh God, I remember now. The accident. There was an accident. The road was wet and I swerved and hit something and then the line went silent. Not dead, just silent. Like Avis Trammell was thinking or remembering or experiencing something she couldn't articulate. Avis, are you still there? I think I died, she said quietly. I think I died and I've been driving this road ever since, trying to find my way to somewhere I can't reach anymore. The phone keeps ringing and I keep answering and people like you keep trying to help, but nobody can reach me. Because I'm not really here. I'm just an echo of the last moments before I understood what had happened. Eamon heard Ria's voice on the radio, strained and frightened. Control, I'm leaving the scene. Something's very wrong here. The payphone is... I don't know how to describe it. It's like it's there and not there at the same time. I can see it, but when I reach out to touch it, my hand goes right through the metal. And I can hear voices now, multiple voices, all calling for help from different times. This isn't a technical malfunction. This is something else. Unit 7, maintain your position. I'm calling for additional units. But even as Eamon said it, he knew that more officers wouldn't help. This wasn't a situation that could be resolved with backup and procedure. This was something that existed outside the normal rules. Something that had been growing at milepost 47 ever since that phone line was decommissioned 6 years ago. Or maybe it had been growing long before that. Maybe the phone had always been a thin place, a spot where the boundary between here and somewhere else was permeable. And maybe all those calls over the years from stranded motorists hadn't all been from people who were actually there on the physical road. Maybe some of them had been from people who'd gotten lost in a different way, people who'd slipped through the cracks in reality and found themselves calling for help from a phone that existed in multiple states simultaneously. "Avis," Eamon said gently, "I need you to listen to me. I can't help you get home, but I can listen. I can stay on the line with you. You don't have to be alone." "Thank you," Avis whispered. "I've been so alone. Driving and driving with nowhere to arrive. At least now someone knows I'm here. At least now someone's listening." The radio. "Control, I'm getting back in my vehicle. Whatever's happening at this location, I need distance from it." The payphone is starting to look different, like it's rebuilding itself from nothing. Wires growing out of empty air. Plastic forming around a frame that shouldn't exist. I've never seen anything like this. "Copy, Unit 7. Return to your vehicle and maintain visual distance from the anomaly." Anomaly, yeah, that's one word for it. Ria's cruiser door slammed. "What do I put in the report, Eamon? How do I explain that I found a ghost phone generating ghost calls from ghost drivers?" "We'll worry about the report later. Just stay safe." But Eamon knew there would be no good way to explain this. No rational framework that would contain what was happening at milepost 47. The county would send investigators. They'd find the old payphone housing. They'd run tests on the phone lines and find nothing unusual. The official explanation would be that the storm had caused some kind of electrical feedback in the decommissioned system, generating phantom signals that Eamon and Ria had misinterpreted as actual calls. And maybe that explanation would satisfy the people who needed reality to make sense according to predictable rules. But Eamon would know better. He would know that somewhere in the dark stretches of County Road 19, people were still calling from a phone that shouldn't exist, trying to reach help that couldn't arrive, trapped in the moment between being lost and being found. Avis Trammell's voice whispered through the static. "Can you do something for me? Can you tell my daughter I'm sorry I never made it to Tennessee? Tell her I tried to find the road, but I got lost and I'm still lost, and I'll probably always be lost. But tell her I love her. Tell her I kept driving as long as I could." "I'll tell her," Eamon said, even though he knew he'd never be able to find Avis Trammell's daughter. Knew there was no way to trace a caller who might have died years ago or might never have existed at all. The line went silent again. Eamon checked his call log and saw that the connection was still active, just transmitting nothing but that endless static and the occasional metallic ring. Ding. The phone at milepost 47 was still ringing somewhere. In some version of reality where roads went places they'd never gone in this world, where calls could travel backward through time, where the lost and the dead could still reach out for help they would never receive. And Eamon Kells sat in the 911 center in Mercy County, listening to the static, waiting for the next impossible call. Ria Donnelly had been a patrol officer for 9 years, And in that time, she'd responded to everything from fatal car accidents to armed standoffs to a particularly memorable incident involving a black bear that had wandered into someone's kitchen. She'd seen bodies, seen violence, seen things that most people only experience through news reports and TV shows. But she had never in all those years felt the specific kind of wrongness that was emanating from the decommissioned payphone at milepost 47. She sat in her cruiser 20 yards back from the phone station, engine running, headlights illuminating the metal housing that shouldn't be doing anything but definitely was. The payphone was ringing with mechanical persistence, that old-fashioned bell sound that payphones used to make before everything went digital. Ding, 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 ding. The sound carried clearly through the damp night air, impossible and undeniable. And the road. Jesus, the road. Rhea had driven County Road 19 hundreds of times over the years. She knew every curve, every pothole, every mile marker. The road ran straight as an arrow through this section, 40 miles of uninterrupted pavement connecting the state forest to the interstate. She'd driven this exact stretch just last week during a routine patrol, but now, in the wash of her headlights, she could see that the pavement ended 50 feet past the payphone station. Not crumbled, not washed out, but cleanly terminated like someone had taken a knife and cut the road in half. Beyond that line was grass, not the torn-up mess you'd expect if the road had collapsed or been removed, but smooth, undisturbed grass that looked like it had been growing there for decades. The tire tracks in the mud near the edge told a different story. Fresh tracks, probably from within the last few hours, leading right up to the point where pavement met grass. And then nothing, like the vehicle had driven off the edge of the world. "Control, Unit 7. Rhea keyed her radio, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need you to access the County Road maintenance records for County Road 19. Specifically, I need to know if there's been any construction or road closure in the past week that I wasn't notified about." Eamon's voice came back almost immediately. "Stand by, Unit 7. A pause, then. "County records show County Road 19 has been continuously maintained and fully operational. Last major work was pothole repair in March. There's no record of any closure or construction." "Then somebody needs to update those records because I'm telling you the road doesn't exist past milepost 47. It just stops. Unit 7, I'm going to conference in the county highway supervisor. This needs to be documented officially." Eamon's tone carried an edge of concern that went beyond standard procedure. "But Rhea, I need you to tell me, are you experiencing any unusual symptoms? Dizziness, confusion, visual disturbances?" "I'm fine, Eamon. I'm looking at something impossible, but I'm fine." Rhea stepped out of her cruiser again, flashlight in hand, moving closer to the payphone housing. The metal box stood on its concrete pad like a monument to obsolete technology, door hanging open on rusted hinges, interior stripped of everything except some dangling wires and the remnants of a wasp nest. And it was ringing. Not from any visible mechanism. There was no phone, no bells, no electrical connection. But the sound was emanating from the housing itself, from the metal and concrete, like the structure had become a speaker for something that existed in a frequency human ears could barely perceive. Rhea reached out to touch the metal, then hesitated. Her earlier attempt had resulted in her hand passing through the housing like it was made of smoke. She tried again, slowly, watching her fingers approach the rust-streaked surface. This time, the metal was solid, cold and solid under her palm, vibrating slightly with each ring. "That's new," she muttered. "Control, the payphone housing is physically solid now. Whatever was happening before, the phasing, the transparency, it seems to have stabilized." "Copy that, Unit 7. I'm still on the line with Avis Trammell. She's—" Eamon's voice cut off, replaced by a burst of static. Rhea pulled her hand back from the metal. The static was coming from her radio, but also from the payphone. and as she stood there in the cold night air, she realized both sounds were synchronized. Whatever was happening at this location wasn't confined to the phone itself. It was affecting her equipment, the radio frequency, possibly the entire electromagnetic spectrum in the immediate area. A new voice joined the static, male and young, speaking rapidly. "Don't understand how I got here. I was just driving home from work and the road looked different, but I thought it was just the storm. I didn't realize until too late that I'd turned onto something that wasn't really there." Another voice overlapping. "Been trying to reach my husband for hours, but my cell phone doesn't work. And this is the only phone I could find, but I don't know where I am. The GPS won't load, the maps don't match." And another, "Following the GPS directions exactly, but they led me here. And now I can't find my way back. Every road I take just loops around to this same spot." The voices multiplied. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all crying out from the static, all calling for help from a phone that existed simultaneously in multiple timelines. Rhea stood frozen, listening to the chorus of the lost, understanding with creeping horror that milepost 47 had become a collection point for people who'd somehow slipped off the normal map of reality. Her radio crackled with Eamon's voice, strained and urgent. "Unit 7, I'm getting multiple 911 calls now, all from that location. The system is being flooded. I count at least 30 active connections, all showing the same source number." "I can hear them," Rhea said quietly. "They're all here somehow, calling from different times, different versions of this road. Eamon, what the hell is happening?" Before he could answer, headlights appeared in Rhea's peripheral vision. She spun, hand moving instinctively to her weapon, then relaxed slightly when she saw it was just a civilian vehicle, a pickup truck, moving slowly down County Road 19 from the north. No, not just any pickup truck. Rhea recognized the make and model, recognized the distinctive dent in the driver's side door, recognized the faded bumper sticker for a local feed store that had closed down 8 years ago. She recognized it because she'd seen this exact truck in the impound lot 3 months ago, after its owner had been killed in a single vehicle accident on Route 46. The truck pulled to a stop about 30 feet from the payphone station. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out, mid-50s, wearing coveralls and a John Deere cap, looking confused and irritated. He walked toward Rhea with the purposeful stride of someone who'd been interrupted in the middle of something important. "Officer, thank God," the man said. "I've been trying to find someone to help me. My truck broke down somewhere back that way, and I've been walking for what feels like hours, but I can't find any landmarks I recognize. This whole area looks different from when I drove through this morning." Rhea's mouth had gone dry. She knew this man, Corbin Hale, local farmer and part-time telecom repair technician. She'd been one of the responding officers to his fatal accident, had seen his body being extracted from the wreckage of that same pickup truck after he'd swerved to avoid a deer and hit a tree at 60 miles per hour. Corbin Hale had been dead for 3 months. "Mr. Hale," Rhea said carefully, "do you know what day it is?" "What? It's Tuesday. No, wait, Wednesday? I left the house this morning to check on the cell tower up by the state forest, but..." He trailed off, looking around with growing uncertainty. "This isn't right. None of this is right. Where's the road? Why does everything look so dark?" "Mr. Hale, I need you to think very carefully. What's the last thing you remember before you started walking?" "I was driving. There was something in the road, a deer, I think. I swerved to avoid it, and then..." His face went pale. Oh God, I crashed, didn't I? I hit the tree, I felt the impact, and then everything went dark, and I thought I'd just blacked out for a minute, but it's been longer than that, hasn't it? It's been a lot longer." Rhea keyed her radio with trembling fingers. "Control, I need you to pull up the file on Corbin Hale. Vehicle accident on Route 46, approximately 3 months ago. Eamon's response came back after a moment of searching. Corbin Hale, deceased August 14th. Fatal collision with a tree, pronounced dead on scene. Why are you asking about a closed case, Unit 7? Because Corbin Hale is standing in front of me right now, and he doesn't know he's dead. Silence on the radio. Then, quietly, Unit 7. I need you to repeat that. The deceased driver from the August accident is here at milepost 47. He's disoriented, seems to think he just crashed, doesn't realize 3 months have passed. Rhea was watching Corbin carefully, seeing the way his form flickered slightly in her flashlight beam, the way he seemed simultaneously solid and transparent. Eamon, I think this location is collecting them. Everyone who died on these roads, everyone who got lost and never found their way home, they're all being drawn here to the payphone. Corbin was backing away, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. No, that can't be right. I can't be dead. I have work to finish. I have to check that cell tower. I have to... He looked down at his hands, saw the way they were becoming translucent, and let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. What's happening to me? More vehicles were appearing now, emerging from the darkness like ghosts, coalescing into temporary solidity. An old sedan with a shattered windshield, a motorcycle with bent forks and a missing wheel, a minivan with its entire passenger side caved in. All of them showed damage. All of them were driven or occupied by people who looked lost and frightened and didn't seem to understand where they were or how they'd gotten there. The drivers got out, drawn toward the payphone like moths to a flame. A teenage girl in a prom dress, makeup running from tears. An elderly man in pajamas, looking around in bewilderment. A woman clutching a baby carrier, rocking it gently even though the carrier was empty. All of them dead. All of them unable to accept or even perceive their own deaths, trapped in the moment between impact and oblivion. Unit 7, evacuate immediately. Eamon's voice was sharp with command. You're in the presence of some kind of mass temporal displacement event. Get back to your vehicle and return to the station. I can't just leave them, Eamon. They're asking for help. They're beyond help. Whatever you're seeing, it's not the actual people. It's echoes, residual energy, something that's being amplified by whatever's wrong with that location. You need to leave before you become part of it. But Rhea couldn't move. She was watching the dead crowd around the payphone, watching them reach for a device that no longer existed, listening to them make calls that would never connect to anything in the real world. They were trapped here, she realized, caught in a loop, endlessly calling for help, endlessly waiting for someone to answer, endlessly unable to understand that the help they needed was beyond anything the living could provide. The payphone's ringing had become a cacophony, dozens of overlapping rings, all slightly out of sync, creating a dissonant symphony that made Rhea's teeth ache. And through the ringing came voices, so many voices, calling out to loved ones, to dispatchers, to anyone who might be listening. Please come get me. I don't know where I am. The accident wasn't my fault. I need to make sure everyone knows it wasn't my fault. Tell my wife I'm sorry. Tell her I was trying to get home. I can see the lights ahead, but I can't reach them. The road just keeps going and I never arrive anywhere. Rhea felt tears on her cheeks and didn't remember starting to cry. These were people, or had been people, or were the memory of people who'd died on these rural roads far from help, far from home. And somehow their final moments had been captured here, preserved by whatever strange property the milepost 47 location possessed, playing out on endless repeat. A hand touched her shoulder and she spun, weapon half drawn, to find herself looking at Avis Trammell. The woman was in her 70s, wearing a floral print dress and sensible driving shoes, her gray hair carefully permed. She looked solid and real, but Rhea could see stars through her chest. "You're the officer who came to help," Avis said gently. "Thank you for that. Not many people can see us anymore. Not many people listen when we call. Mrs. Trammell, I don't understand what's happening here. Neither do we, dear. We're just driving, trying to find our way home, and we keep ending up here, at this phone, on this road that doesn't go anywhere anymore." Avis looked around at the other dead, her expression sad but accepting. "I think we're stuck between where we were and where we were supposed to go. The accident happened, and we should have moved on to whatever comes next, but something about these roads kept us here. Maybe because we died alone. Maybe because nobody knew where we were when it happened. Maybe because we weren't ready to let go." Behind Avis, Corbin Hale was talking to the teenager in the prom dress, both of them comparing notes on their respective accidents, trying to piece together how they'd ended up in this impossible space. Others were doing the same, forming small groups, sharing stories of wrong turns and bad weather, and the moment when they'd realized something had gone catastrophically wrong. "How many of you are there?" Rhea asked. "I don't know. Dozens that I've met. Maybe hundreds that I haven't. People have been dying on these roads for as long as there have been roads. We all end up here eventually if we died the right way, alone, confused, in the dark." Avis smiled, and it was the saddest thing Rhea had ever seen. The payphone is the only thing that still works, the only connection to the world we left behind. So we keep calling, keep trying to reach someone who might understand, might help us find the way home. But the payphone was decommissioned 6 years ago. The line was cut, the equipment removed. Time doesn't work the same for us as it does for you. From our perspective, the phone is always working, always there. It exists in all the moments at once, before it was installed, while it was in service, after it was removed. We can access it from any of those timelines. Avis looked back at the metal housing, now surrounded by translucent figures desperately trying to make calls that would never connect. "I think that's why this place became a collection point. The phone bridged so many different times, connected so many different moments that it created a weak spot in whatever separates the living from the dead." Rhea's radio erupted with static, and through it came Eamon's voice, distant and distorted. "Unit 7, your signal is degrading. I'm reading electromagnetic interference levels that shouldn't be possible. You need to move away from that location immediately before—" The transmission cut off completely. Rhea looked down at her radio and saw the display flickering, showing timestamps from different years cycling rapidly. 2017, 2023, 2019, 2024, 2015. The device was losing its ability to maintain a coherent position in time, just like everything else at milepost 47. "You should go," Avis said, "while you still can. This place pulls at the living same as it pulls at the dead. Stay too long and you might find yourself unable to leave, might find yourself slipping between the moments until you're not sure which timeline you belong to anymore. What about you? What about all of you? I can't just leave you here. We're already here, dear. Have been for months or years or decades. A few more won't make much difference." Avis patted Rhea's shoulder with a hand that felt like cold mist. "But if you want to help us, you could do one thing. You could let people know we're here, not officially. I know you can't put ghosts in a police report. But maybe you could tell the families, the ones still looking for answers about what happened to their loved ones. Tell them we're not in pain, we're not suffering, we're just waiting, trying to find our way home." Rhea wanted to argue, wanted to insist there had to be some way to help, some procedure or protocol that could resolve this impossible situation. But she was a cop, not an exorcist, and this was so far beyond her training that she didn't even have vocabulary to describe it. More vehicles were arriving, materializing out of the darkness like they were driving through from some other dimension. Rhea recognized some of them from accident reports she'd filed over the years. Vehicles that had been totaled, drivers that had been killed, cases that had been closed and filed away. They were all here, all drawn to this location by forces she couldn't begin to understand. And then she saw the one that made her blood turn to ice. Her own patrol cruiser. Not the one she'd arrived in, which was still sitting 20 yards away with its lights on. This was a different cruiser with the same unit number, approaching from the south where the road should have ended, but apparently still existed in some other version of reality. It pulled to a stop near the payphone station, and the driver's door opened. Rhea Donnelly stepped out. Not the current Rhea, standing there watching in horror. This was a different Rhea, older by maybe 5 years, wearing the same uniform but with sergeant stripes on the shoulders. This other Rhea looked tired, worn down by years of impossible nights and unexplainable calls. She walked toward the payphone with the resigned determination of someone who'd made this trip before and knew exactly what she'd find. "Don't look so shocked," Avis said quietly. "Time doesn't flow in one direction here. That's you from 5 years ahead, coming back to this place because you never really left it. This night marked you, changed you, made you part of whatever's wrong with milepost 47. You'll keep coming back, keep trying to understand, keep hoping you can help us find our way home." The future Rhea didn't seem to see her past self. She walked right past the current Rhea like she wasn't there, approached the crowd of dead, and began speaking to them in low, comforting tones. Rhea couldn't hear the words, but she could see the effect. The dead calmed down, stopped their frantic calling, gathered around the future version of her like she was a shepherd and they were lost sheep who'd finally found someone to follow. "Is that real?" Rhea whispered. "Am I really going to spend the next 5 years coming back here?" "Every week," Avis confirmed. "You're the only officer who ever really saw us, the only one who listened when we called. So you keep coming back, keep checking on us, keep trying to find a way to help even though there isn't one. It becomes your purpose, your obsession. Some might call it a haunting, but I think it's more like a calling." Rhea watched her future self comfort the dead, saw the ease with which she moved among them, and felt something settle in her chest. Not fear anymore, but a strange kind of acceptance. If this was her future, spending years trying to help people who were beyond help, maintaining vigil over a collection of lost souls trapped between life and death, then maybe that wasn't the worst fate. At least she'd be doing something that mattered. Her current timeline radio crackled back to life. Eamon's voice breaking through. "7, if you can hear me, I need you to acknowledge. Your GPS signal is drifting, showing multiple positions simultaneously. Rhea, please respond." She keyed the radio, watching her future self continue working with the dead. "Control, Unit 7, I copy. I'm okay, Eamon, but I need you to understand something. The reports we filed, the missing persons, the unexplained accidents, they're all here. At milepost 47, this is where they ended up. Unit 7, you're not making sense. Are you saying you found bodies?" "No, not bodies, just people who don't know they're not people anymore. People who are still trying to call for help from a phone that exists in all times at once." Rhea took a deep breath. "I'm going to need you to pull every unsolved missing persons case from the last 20 years. Cross-reference them with County Road 19. I think we're going to find that a lot of them had their last known position somewhere along this stretch. And then what? We can't exactly arrest ghosts or file charges against a temporal anomaly. No. But we can acknowledge them. We can let their families know they didn't just disappear into nothing, that they're still here, in a way, still trying to reach out. Rhea looked around at the crowd of dead, saw the hope in their translucent faces. And maybe that's enough. Maybe just being witnessed, being remembered, is what they need to finally move on. Avis Trammell was fading now, her form becoming less distinct as dawn approached. The others were fading too, returning to wherever they existed when the living world wasn't perceiving them. The payphone's ringing had quieted to a soft, almost melodic tone, no longer desperate but almost peaceful. "Will you tell my daughter?" Avis asked as she dissolved into morning mist. "Tell her I loved her, and I'm sorry I never made it to Tennessee and I'm not in pain. Tell her I'm just waiting for the road to open up so I can find my way home." "I'll tell her," Rhea promised. "I'll tell all of them." The future version of Rhea was fading too, returning to her own timeline 5 years ahead. But before she disappeared, she looked back at her past self and smiled, a sad, knowing smile that carried the weight of hundreds of lonely vigils at this impossible place. Then dawn broke fully, and the dead were gone. The vehicles vanished like they'd never been there. The payphone stopped ringing. County Road 19 extended south into the distance exactly as it was supposed to. The grass and the unnatural road end replaced by normal pavement as reality reasserted itself. Rhea stood alone in the morning light, looking at the empty payphone housing that was once again just a decommissioned piece of infrastructure. But she could still hear the ringing in her head, still see the transparent faces of the lost calling out for help they would never receive. Her radio crackled. "Unit 7, do you copy? Your signal just stabilized. What's your status?" "Unit 7 is Code 4, Control. Situation is contained. I'm returning to the station to file my report." "Copy that. You sure you're okay out there?" Rhea looked at the payphone one last time. In the growing daylight, it looked harmless, mundane. Just another relic of obsolete technology that nobody thought about anymore. But she knew better now. She knew what gathered here when darkness fell, knew what voices called out from a phone that didn't exist, knew what happened to people who died alone on dark roads far from home. "I'm fine, Eamon, but we need to talk when I get back. About missing persons cases, about unexplained disappearances, about all the people who vanished on County Road 19 and never came home." "All right, I'll pull the files. But Rhea, what did you really see out there?" Rhea climbed into her cruiser, started the engine, and pulled away from milepost 47. In her rear-view mirror, she could see the payphone housing receding into the distance, already starting to look unreal, like something from a dream she was forgetting upon waking. "I saw the place where lost things go," she said, "and I think I'm going to be seeing it again. For a long time." The official report stated that Officer Rhea Donnelly had responded to multiple 911 calls originating from a decommissioned payphone station, caused by electrical feedback from storm damage to underground phone lines. The anomalous signals had created the impression of active calls, but investigation revealed no persons in distress at the location. The phone company was notified to ensure the lines were properly terminated to prevent future false alarms. The report made no mention of the dead drivers, the impossible road end, or the conversation with Avis Trammell. Those details existed only in the handwritten notes Rhea kept in a private journal, along with the list of names she was slowly compiling. Names of people who'd gone missing on County Road 19, people whose families still waited for answers that official investigations couldn't provide. Eamon Kells never received another call from the milepost 47 payphone during normal business hours. But sometimes, late at night when the 911 center was quiet and the county was sleeping, he'd see a call come through from that old number. He never answered those calls anymore. He'd learned his lesson. Some calls came from places the living shouldn't reach, from people who existed in the spaces between moments, from phones that refused to accept their own obsolescence. The calls always went to voicemail, and if Eamon listened to the recordings later, all he'd hear was static and ringing, and, very faintly, voices calling out for help that would never arrive. Corbin Hale's widow received a letter 6 weeks later, hand-delivered to her mailbox with no return address. The letter was written in careful, official-looking handwriting and contained a single paragraph. "Mrs. Hale, I wanted you to know that your husband, Corbin, was thinking of you in his final moments. He wasn't in pain, and he wasn't afraid. He's in a peaceful place now, still doing the work he loved, still watching over the roads he traveled. He asked me to tell you that he loves you and he's sorry he couldn't come home. A friend." Similar letters appeared in mailboxes across Mercy County over the following months, addressed to the families of people who'd vanished or died on County Road 19. None of the recipients questioned how the letter writer knew such specific details about their loved ones' final moments. They simply took comfort in the words and tried to find peace in not knowing the full truth. And every week, on her night off, Rhea Donnelly drove out to milepost 47 and sat in her cruiser watching the payphone station in the darkness. Most nights, nothing happened. But sometimes, when conditions were right, when fog rolled in from the state forest, when the moon was dark, when the boundary between here and elsewhere grew thin, she'd see them. The dead drivers calling from their phone that existed in all times and no time, trying to find the road that would lead them home. And Rhea would sit with them, listen to their stories, and promise to remember them when the morning came and they faded back into whatever space held those who couldn't or wouldn't move on.